16th, 2025, and we are today in person at the Winooski School District. So I just want to gratitude for our hosts. We had a wonderful student-led tour of the facility. I've never been here before, so it was really wonderful for me to be able to see it and meet the students and see them in action, and also had a phenomenal lunch. So thank you all for having us today. Let's start with a roll call.
Brian Campion. Mohammed Joe.
Here. Good afternoon, everyone.
Greg Barron.
Here.
Caleb Greenwood.
Here.
Jamie Colby.
Here.
Lyle Jepson. Tom Lovett. Cynthia Stewart. Rich Warner.
Here.
Secretary Saunders.
Here.
And Chair Sanderson.
Here, thank you. All right, before we get started, are there any amendments to the agenda?
Yeah, I'd like to amend the agenda, add some time to discuss the memo that you all passed along about the Vermont School for Girls.
Okay, is that
Came to us yesterday at around 2:30, I think, so that's
is
why
that part of your secretary report?
Well, I'd like to have some dedicated time to talk about it, because I'm sure there are lots of things for us to talk about in the secretary's report.
What point in the agenda would you like to add that?
And keep in mind that we can't talk about anything that might come before the board in our
That's why I said talk about the memo,
Okay,
which is part of the public record now.
right. What would you propose?
Future
What-
meeting planning.
What-
Put it at the end with future meeting planning.
Well, it might be helpful to talk about, I'm trying to think about when we have people. Are you trying to get somebody here to talk about, Joe, are you trying to coordinate staff? Is that why you're
Yes.
asking? Is there a time that works best for your
So
staff?
staff is planning to be available during my secretary's update, should there be any questions around those documents.
Okay, so then why don't we have it come, you want to do it just before that then? We could sort of slide it
Sure.
in there?
So between items K and L?
Yeah.
Okay,
Thanks.
Between P and L.
K and L.
P and L, sorry.
Okay. Any other amendments? Okay. And absent objection, I'm going to move to add that between items K and L.
Makes sense, thanks.
Okay. Hearing no objections. This now takes us to public to be heard. If there are any members of the public who wish to address the board, I see people in the audience, and let me just ask too if we have anyone with us online, *5 or hand icon to raise your hand. Not seeing anyone? Okay, all right. So just some opening instructions. So we ask you to limit yourselves to about 2 minutes each. I see some of you have things that are in writing. If you'd like to submit them for inclusion with the minutes, you're definitely welcome to do so. And as you know, this is a time for us to hear from the public. You may receive a response or not, depending on the comment. So with that, who would like to address the board? All right, Kim.
Hi, yes, Kim Gleason from Grand Isle, and I wanted to call attention. Oh, of course. Hi there, Kim Gleason from Grand Isle. Hi, friends, former State Board of Ed. I wanted to call attention to the 2 emails I sent the board over the last few weeks related to the 2 therapeutic schools that have come into the media attention regarding pretty serious violations of, I think, trust and service to our most vulnerable students. I'd like both of those emails to be made part of the public record, and it addressed Vermont School for Girls, and it sounds as though that may be coming up in the agenda, at least for an update, and Inspire School. And I think important to both are the concerns that the Vermont School for Girls we approved in May of 2023. That report contained nothing about the prior concerns. And consequently, subsequently, I didn't send you all the third story that I'm sure you also saw covered, that same leader is now going to be overseeing the, and received a contract for the correctional facility for young women in Virgins. I think our failure in these occasions to call attention to patterns of concern feels complicit, and I sat on the board at the time that we approved with almost no discussion the school that had, I think, also changed its name. That is that school. I will say that Inspire School, when I got on the State Board of Ed in 2019, was under investigation for financial matters then, and over time has been on and off concern and probation. So a process that fails to hold schools accountable and provide adequate oversight, particularly with their therapeutic schools in that community, is a failure of this body to be protecting our most vulnerable students. And I really believe it is well within the authority and the responsibility of both the AOE and the State Board of Ed to do better by process and not have endless probationary periods or inadequate immediate responses when these approved schools, any of them, have a change that they've not informed us of. Clearly, in many of these cases, they were not doing background checks. There were not licensed staff. You know, Lee High School closed, Stone Path closed. There's been a stream of these things, and we have an incredible backlog, and I don't recall there having been really any renewals considered since the rush to get things approved before the moratorium. I think we can all do better, and we all must. So I compel you to really bring these things to close and invite us to do better by our students.
Thank you. And I am remembering, Kim, I had told you that your emails would be included under public comment, and they weren't, but they will be.
Thank you, I appreciate that. There were two somewhat detailed emails with links to past things that I, just referenced here. So I think it's helpful to consider that full history, but importantly, to take action.
Thank you.
If I may respond to that. So thank you very much for your testimony, and want to emphasize that the Agency of Education takes our role of oversight and accountability very seriously. I can't speak to what may have occurred under prior leadership, but I have brought forward to the board a recognition of the backlog in independent school approvals and a plan to address that. We'll continue to make the board updated as we're moving forward on that to address the backlog. It is critically important to me and to the agency that we are ensuring there's high levels of accountability and oversight. And so we take that responsibility very seriously.
Follow-up, if that's okay? Sure. It is really to that idea of addressing the backlog. And the initial conversation of all from our state board meeting was that therapeutics would not be on that list. It appears they may be on the list now. That was a concern back then, and I believe also the board was informed that those renewals would begin coming up in the spring. So I was quite surprised not to see them on an April agenda because we're solidly in spring. So I'm sure I'll look forward to future.
With the snow, I don't know.
Irony of it, isn't it? Don't pan them out, please, on the video. But I'm sure you can appreciate that I was a little bit surprised to not see any come on this agenda. So thank you.
And I can provide an update later, but we do have a schedule that we'll be adhering to. We can provide that update starting in May.
Yep. All right. Welcome, Tom. Any other members of the public who wish to address the board? Yes, welcome.
Hello, thank you. My name is Kirsten Tyler, and I am a resident of Westford, and I have two middle schoolers in the Westford school. Westford is a small rural town of 2,000 people in our school district of over 20,000. Our school has about 20 kids per grade, and it is the heart of our community. Parent involvement is high, our test scores are strong, and our kids are thriving. We merged with Essex in 2017 with the promise of lower taxes and more opportunities. The Essex-Westford School District recently voted to consolidate Westford's middle schoolers into Essex Middle School without transparency, real community engagement, an impact assessment, an equitable transportation plan, and no multi-year plan for the future of Westford School. The district claims that this change will save $150,000 in a $96 million budget, a fraction of the budget in just 1 year of savings. With this change, our kids will spend over 2 hours per day on the bus. This is not an equitable solution for Westford. It cuts off families from participating in school life and makes extracurriculars nearly impossible. It disproportionately affects families with multiple children, low incomes, and single-parent households. It disproportionately affects kids with 504s and IEPs. Moreover, this consolidation is just the first step towards closing Westford School entirely. With the loss of our middle school students, our per pupil cost is projected to raise from $20,000 to $27,000, 34% higher than any other school in our district. These numbers are unsustainable, and closure of our school is inevitable. We do not want to be the next Roxbury. And all of this is happening while Vermont is actively exploring statewide education funding reform and redistricting. Making irreversible decisions now puts our rural school at serious and unnecessary risk. So we are asking the State Board of Education to intervene. I did send a couple emails, and so I would like those to become part of public record, and I would love a response on those. The people of the Westford town formally request a 1-year pause on this consolidation and an investigation into potential policy violations by the EWSD leadership. When I spoke with Attorney David Kelly about this, he advised me to bring it directly to you because our concerns are both legitimate and urgent. Legislators need to take this example to heart when discussing education funding reform. We need local control, and we need our small rural schools intact. We do not need kids, 10-year-olds, on the bus for over 2 hours per day. Thank you.
Thank you. Other members of the public?
Can I just clarify, to whom did she send your emails? Did you send them to Jennifer? You said you sent emails to the State Board. It would be really helpful to know where, one, so we can include them because of public record, and we're usually pretty good at getting back to people, so.
Yeah,
To whom did you send them?
I can look at my email.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for asking.
I just know our chair is really diligent about responding to your email, including the 600 plus she's received last week.
Yeah. All right. Any other members of the public who wish to be heard? If not, we will have space again at the end of our meeting. So at this point, I'm going to close public comment. I'm going to move on to our next agenda item, which is a motion to approve the minutes of our March 19th, 2025 State Board of Education meeting. Is there a motion?
I'll move that.
All right. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
All right. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the minutes of our March 19th, 2025 meeting, please raise your hand and signify by saying aye.
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 Welcome, Cynthia.
Jennifer, I'm here.
Yeah, welcome. All those opposed, please raise your hand and signify by saying nay. Any abstentions? Hearing none, the motion carries. Which brings us to board announcements, and if it's okay with everyone, I've got several, so I'm going to jump in. So in no particular order, I do want to point out, with regard to public comment and therapeutic schools, the board has received the emails, and I appreciate Kim coming here today and raising the issue again. Just a reminder, Rule 2226 sets forth the process for complaints and investigations of schools. The board is committed to following that process, and at this point, I'm not going to say anything more because we can't comment on things that may come before us in our quasi-judicial capacity. So I did just want to point that out. Also, I see Tom is with us, Cynthia is with us. Lyle, I believe, is going to be logging on sometime between 1 and 1:15, and I do know that Brian was unable to be with us today. Also, I want to acknowledge all of the emails that were sent to the board in the last week with regard to the Title VI compliance certification. I believe all of those emails were sent to everyone on the board. Tom had a running count. I think we're probably close to about 700 emails now. And as I promised to the board, I did respond to every single one of those emails. Actually, there might be 2 in my inbox, so I will get those too. But it was overwhelming last week, I'm not going to lie. But at the same time, I read the stories that were included in those emails, and I know that other board members have taken the time to read those emails as well. And so I just wanted to acknowledge everyone who took the time to reach out. What was really clear to me is that people are engaged, people really care, people are concerned, and it was important to me if someone took the time to email the board that we were going to respond back. So I did want to let everyone know I did respond, but just really wanted to express my gratitude to the public who took the time to reach out to the board. These are trying times, but what I really love is that, Vermonters are in this and we're in it together. Next, just a FYI, I testified last Thursday before Senate Education regarding proposed changes to 3 VSA Section 2702, which has to do with the secretary search, and just answered questions to the Senate Education Committee. I did include in the agenda packet the secretary search slide deck that I had prepared about 1.5 years ago, but there's a different composition on Senate Ed, so I thought, for people who hadn't seen it the first time around, it might be helpful for them to see what the board did before talking about what might be done differently. So I think it was a productive conversation. I think for the people who had not been on the committee last year, this was really helpful information because I don't think they really understood the process that we stood up to lead us to Zoe. And also, Tammy and I are testifying tomorrow before House Ed about the board's independent school approval process, particularly with regard to therapeutic schools. So that will be tomorrow at 11. And then just 2 other FYIs. Just putting in a plug again for our new student member. Gray will be transitioning off the board on June 30th, so we will be looking for a new student member to start on July 1st. There is something in the agenda packet, but just briefly, rising sophomores and rising juniors are encouraged to apply. There is a link online that's hyperlinked, and questions about the State Board of Education may be directed to aoe.edinfo@vermont.gov. And of course, if anyone has any questions, you can email me and I can put you in contact with the proper person. And then finally, also want to get out the word that the agency has officially opened up its nominations for the 2026 Teacher of the Year. Anyone can be nominated, and the Cognito nomination form can be accessed. There's a hyperlink that would be provided that will be included in the minutes. In addition to educators recognized by their district during UVM's Outstanding Educator Awards, publicly nominated teachers will be invited to apply to be the Vermont Teacher of the Year next month. Public nominations are open to all members of the community, and nominations are open until April 28th. If anyone has any questions, they can contact Katie Galliardo. Her email is katie, K-A-T-I-E, .Galliardo, G-A-G-L-I-A-R-D-O, @vermont.gov. So, any other announcements? All right. Hearing none, Gray, I will start with you in the student report.
Okay. Well, you guys already heard a little bit about my personal life and updates. Just in general with the school, we finally had our musical, 9 to 5, which was a lot of fun. And that's one of the only major performative arts things that happens at our school during the year, so that's always a big deal. Actually, just last night, on a similar note, was the final high school and middle school band concert. And for me, my last high school band concert ever of the year. And there is one more chorus concert. The chorus kids every year do a Pops concert, which this year is Glee themed, like the TV show. So it's all songs that are featured at some point in the TV show Glee. And that'll be a little bit later on. And then we still have marching band stuff at the end of the year for the Memorial Day parades, or later on in the year at least. And then all of our spring sports seasons have started, although they're all pretty early and stuff. And I think everything from the winter seasons has officially wrapped up, with the last thing being wrestling. Their New England's competition is very late. That was, I think, that actually might not be done. I don't know wrestling super well, but that was either last weekend or maybe even still next weekend. So that's a long season for them. But besides that, at least, everything has now transitioned on to spring sports. Our first track meet was yesterday, and most teams and stuff have had their first games within the last week. Yeah, that is, I think, all that's really happening at Regents.
And you said that it's snowing now.
Yes, and now it's snowing.
Merry Christmas.
That's coming in.
Great, will you be continuing band when you go to college, or do you think that was your last?
I'll try. Yeah, I'll bring my trombone and lug it to Vassar and audition. I've made sure none of their ensembles actually require a music major. You don't need to be a music major to join, so I'll give it a shot and see if I end up playing my instrument anywhere, because otherwise I think it would be very difficult to continue to practice on my own if it's not in a group, so I'll try.
Questions or comments for Gray? All right, thank you. And Caleb?
Well, I know that our school, like I had addressed in the last meeting, finished up its search for a superintendent and principal. So now there's internal discussions for a vice principal, and those should be done really soon. So we're looking forward to that. Unfortunately, with that comes every single leadership position being brand new. But luckily, our current vice principal becoming our new principal has been there for quite a while under the group of people that we have now. So hopefully that will help in our transition. I know that our spring sports also just started. Unfortunately, our track is gravel. So we were only just able to get out on it like last week. Whereas other teams like St. J, they've been out for a long time because they have their all-weather track. And we had our first track meet this past Saturday at St. J, and that went pretty well. Once this coming April break comes up, which is next week, so we have that whole week off, then we come back, we only have one more week of school, and then we have AP testing. And then once that is through, I'm pretty much done for the year. I'm gonna have like 2 real classes, and then just post AP class stuff. So after that, my year will be pretty much done, other than track and like 2 classes. And then I have SATs coming up in May, so I'll have to do some studying and stuff like that to get ready for that. And then I don't think we have much else going on at our school currently, so yeah.
Do you guys ever compete against each other in track?
Not really, because it's central Vermont and then really up north Vermont.
There's probably at least one.
I was gonna say.
overlap. I'll look for you throughout the season, see if we're at the same meet.
Just look it up the schedule.
Maybe the Burlington meets, like the Twilight, stuff like that.
Yeah, I was gonna say Twilight.
But I don't think I'll be able to go to the Twilight, because that's the same day as my SATs.
No.
I know.
Comments or questions for Caleb? All right, well, good luck to both of you with your AP exams.
Thank you.
All right, so next up we have our our committee review update. And just as a reminder, last month I asked board members to look at the committees that they were on and to get back to me if there were committees that they wanted to be on, did not want to be on. I've done some playing around, and I'll tell you what I have so far, and then this can certainly be tweaked. I've tried to keep, well, I did keep it so that we have no more than 4 voting members on a committee, just so that we don't run into quorum issues. Of course, right now, and you'll hear, the 2 of you are on one committee, because as you transition off, then you'll become voting. So I will just review who's on which committee, and then again, if you don't like this, just let me know. Roles and Responsibilities Committee, Jennifer, Tammy, Cynthia, and Rich. Student Performance Standards Committee, Tammy, Mohammed, Gray, and Caleb. I guess there are only 4 on there right now. Rule Series 2200 Approvals Committee, Tom, Lyle, and Cynthia. The CTE Update Committee, Lyle and Tammy as co-chairs, Tom and Rich. And then the Legislative Update, Jennifer, Tammy, and Brian. So if anyone else has any final words about if they want to shift things around, just let me know. I do think some of these committees are now, stood up. Whether or not we have work in those committees, I think we'll know. It kind of depends on what happens with the General Assembly and what happens with the State Board of Education. And I can see, depending on what happens during this legislative session, that there might be other committees that might be created, and we might find ourselves with a lot of work. So at least for right now, we are ready for what we know might be coming our way, and then if we need to reevaluate, we can do that. Okay, so I think this brings us to the presentation from Winooski, and Mohammed, I will turn it over to you.
Oh, is it to me or to Wilmer? I need to check in Wilmer if he is available to come in for that.
Because we are a little bit ahead of schedule, aren't we? And if they're not ready, we can jump ahead.
It was scheduled for 1:15 to 2, is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Should we
But
jump to something else and come back? Would that be helpful?
if time will allow us to accomplish anything, sure. If not, I'm happy to call them in.
Well, we could do future meeting planning, or, yeah, because Katie Ballard isn't here yet.
Lisa was here, but not here.
And Lisa's not here, Jill?
Right. Oh, yeah, she's not online either.
Oh, right, because she was going to be in person.
Yep.
Here comes somebody.
Okay.
Oh, there is Wilmer.
Sorry, we're a little ahead of schedule.
Doesn't usually happen.
That's right.
You are not late.
Were you just waiting for?
Are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. I think you invited other people, didn't you?
I did, but
Are they
yours
coming?
is on your own and theirs are on their own. But you are all welcome to attend at the
Okay.
presentation.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, this is Kate. She's the principal of the middle school, and she was not planning to be here. I just dragged her here. First of all, I want to welcome everybody to our school district. It's a very funny school district because it's just one big set of facilities, so I hope you enjoyed the walk that you took this morning. I enjoy coming to work every day because it's really not an office job. It's I just go into schools. The schools are around me, so whenever I feel tired or just when I've had it, I just go to the pre-K or pre-K classrooms and do something with the kids. So it's a very enjoyable place to be, and I hope you're enjoying your day as much as I do every day. The Winooski School District is also unique in many other ways. You may have heard we have a very high rate of diversity in all sorts of ways. An obvious one that is very visual is racial diversity, ethnic diversity, diversity in nationalities. One you may have heard is languages, lots of languages spoken here. And then diversity in so many other ways. It would just be a matter of you going into a classroom and listening to just the diversity of perspectives. Students, even when they share certain identities, are not a monolith. They have their own unique personal angles to everything and their own identities that meet the whole wheel of identities. So that is something unique also about our school. And that also means that characteristic of our school district is very relevant in this moment in the history of the US. We are in the middle of very challenging times, and we are not isolated from that. In fact, we tend to be directly impacted by a lot of the things going on at the national and state level. And that is why some of the work that our administrators and leaders in the school, and educators as well in the school district, have had to do lately ventures into advocacy beyond just what people usually think of education or instruction. And so the Winooski School District, whether we like it or not, advocacy is one thing we do on a daily basis, advocacy at all levels, because it's not just to feel good about ourselves or just to look good, it's because our families will get angry with us if we don't do it. It is our responsibility. It is what our community requires of us to do, and we are owned by our community. We do policy governance here, and in policy governance, you call your community, your stakeholders, your owners. They are your owners. You have to answer to them. And if they've tasked us with advocacy, that is what we're going to do, among the many other things that happen in the schools. So one example of advocacy that has happened for the past few months has been affirming and recognizing the fear that's going through many of the households here in Winooski and many of our communities, neighbors, in terms of immigration enforcement coming from the federal government. Immigration enforcement is not a new thing, has been around for a long time, for as long as this history has been a thing, the history of this country has been a thing, but immigration has been approached in many different ways, and 2025 is by far the most cruel we could think of. And there's a lot to pick from, a lot of cruelty in the US history to pick from. And 2025 is showing signs of something very dark, very ugly, and very stressful. And I do not think that we can pretend that that's not happening and then go into a classroom and teach math as usual. I think that we need to acknowledge the suffering of our families, the anxiety that our students are feeling first, before we do the rest. And so there are many ways to affirm these concerns and to support our families, and we should do everything we can. And one way in which we've done it is to create a policy that we call the Sanctuary Schools Policy, and then not stop at that, but also create a lengthy procedure based on that policy to tell our teachers, our families, our community, our staff, how we activate the power of that policy, and then train our students and staff on those procedures as well. That is work that has been going on for months now, and we become stronger and stronger by the day. And eventually, as we become stronger, hopefully we can support other districts, other neighbors in the rest of the state to share our experiences with them, and hopefully we can have a ripple effect on not only how we support our students who are immigrants and their families, but also supporting the idea that just bringing this forward to the conversation is powerful in and of itself. And I think silence, like many people are saying, is the thing that can continue to enable injustice. So being silent and not making this part of our conversation is what we're trying to avoid. So in your packet, I hope the policy itself and the set of procedures are reflected. I'm happy to answer any questions if you got a chance to scan through that. It's a lot of stuff, but I'm not going to go through the policy itself because I only have 10 minutes, right? I was given 10 minutes.
That's right.
But I will say that the policy was a powerful, and symbolic effort when it happened, because it forced not only our board, we have at least one board member here, not only our board to confront a very difficult question, and the question of threat to lose very precious funding, very precious resources that we cannot afford to lose, while at the same time making a loud enough statement that is categorical, that basically tells our community that there's no hesitation about this, and we're going to do it early, and we're going to do it loudly. And we know that that comes with visibility, we know that that comes with dangers, and the board engaged in very deep conversation about the ramifications of that conversation, but ultimately decided to approve the policy and to adopt it. And the community showing of support for the effort was overwhelming. Many people had not seen the movement and the groundswell of support for something that our schools were doing in a long time. And so it served as a type of revival of that spirit in Winooski. And a lot of people felt that sense of community, a sense of collective support. And the policy being the venue of that. So does anybody have any questions about this policy or anything else? Yeah.
Do we have it in our
I was just going to ask, do we have the policy?
I'm asking Krista for it now.
Yeah, I didn't see it.
I am so sorry.
I'm asking Krista to send us copies.
Yes, and I'll be happy to send it. It's So the policy then, I will just give you a 30-second cheat sheet about that. It does certain things explicitly, and it doesn't do other things. And the things that it does includes restricting employees from willingly collaborating with immigration enforcement agencies, restricts people from sharing information that they're not authorized to do, especially when that information might lead to disclosing aspects about a family's identity that could put them in danger for immigration enforcement. It establishes very specific procedure for what to do if ICE actually shows up in our schools and what each staff member's role is in that moment of crisis. It establishes the school as a information hub for immigrant families. We create new initiatives like the newly established initiative that started last week. It's a home visiting initiative for school staff and volunteers to actually go house by house in households that are recognized as in need of this support. Now that has been very powerful. We did a pilot. Actually, I just saw some of our multilingual liaisons walk in. They've been engaged in this as well. We've done Know Your Rights events for the community, for students. We continue to partner with organizations that do this work in the state to provide, again, one-on-one support for families. We have identified families specifically and not support them as a group, but instead as a family or as an individual. So we get very intimately familiar with their situation and we deploy our resources to support them and to support the students. There are things that the policy doesn't do, and one thing is that it doesn't do is to provide a blanket shield for immigration enforcement against specific individuals. We remind people that much like a sanctuary city cannot prevent immigration enforcement from deporting somebody within the city boundaries, a school is the same. Our policy establishes sanctuary overall in as many senses of the word as we can, but it doesn't mean that we can just tell ICE not to do something. We also ask our staff not to put themselves in harm's way. We also ask our staff not to do anything unlawful. But we understand that an actual situation of enforcement is a very tricky situation, and that's where training comes in. The more we see on the news and the more we become aware of what's actually happening on the ground, we realize that ICE is not interested in respecting its own policies, much less the law. And so we are facing lawlessness in a way, and the exertion of the highest power in the country in violation of basic civil rights of people, and our staff have to be trained in how to confront a situation that's so uncertain and so dangerous. So there are things that the policy doesn't do, and like I said, one of the things that it doesn't do is to tell our staff to put themselves in harm's way. We are in the face of uncertainty and danger, and we want to be clear that we're not asking anybody to be heroes or to put themselves in situations that can be detrimental to their own safety. So now that I've given you that quick overview, do you have any questions?
I have one quick one.
With the time, you can go with one question for Wilma.
Yeah, just, so where did you come up with like the basis of this? Was there samples that you were able to get? Because I've not seen one floating around anywhere. Was it, or is it something you guys kind of just made from scratch?
No, not at all. So there was a lot of movement nationwide. Actually, before Donald Trump won in November, there was a lot of conversation nationwide through, you name it, human rights organizations, legal advocacy organizations, in preparing for a potential second Trump administration. And I'm usually very attuned to those movements, and that information happening nationwide. not only because of who I am. I'm an immigrant. I face a lot of those dangers. My family is facing deportation in next week, basically, and so we're having to make very difficult choices. So on a personal level, I pay attention to those things. As a leader also, I realized I lead a district where many of the families are confronting those same questions. And so it only makes sense that we remain in contact, and also in contact with other national and local organizations, but also very well informed. And so there were entities, also other school districts and entities, advocacy organizations and legal organizations in the state also having those same conversations. And there was a sort of informal gathering at some point, I believe in November. There was an open invitation to anybody who wanted to come to the conversation, and I decided I would go to that. About what we could do to protect our families if there was a second Trump administration. And I realized that I think I was the only superintendent there, and then I realized that, well, then I have a responsibility. If one of the ways in which we're going to protect our families is via policy, well, originally it was a resolution. We wanted to encourage districts to have resolutions in support of immigrant families. I personally suggested and pushed that group of people and advocates to instead talk policy, because a resolution can be ignored. Sometimes resolutions are just statements with, well-meaning statements, but not really much power. And so I pushed the group to instead create a model policy that we could model after other states. We used some examples from California, something that the ACLU had put out. And then we modified that to the Vermont reality. So we changed a lot of the language in the model policy. Then once I was ready to present it for Winooski, I went ahead and drafted even more changes that were representative of the locality. And that's what we presented to the board. Then the board did its own thing, suggested its own changes, and that's ultimately what got adopted. And I'm really looking forward to you having that policy since you didn't have it. Thank you for your question.
Thank you.
I want to acknowledge before we let you go, it is clear to the board that school isn't just about school, right? Like, it's not that kids get dropped off and they come into the classroom and they're learning and then they go home and, you're done with your school day. They come in with what's going on at home, and there's a lot going on at home right now in so many different directions. And the overlay that it puts on, the teachers, the administration, I recognize it's a lot, and I just want to appreciate what you're doing, in Winooski, and really being a model for other districts in the state or in other parts of the country. It's just, I know that you guys are doing a lot to protect your students and your families, and I thank you.
Thank you.
I would also like to say that, but in my own words.
Yeah, of course.
So I can't help but give you guys your flowers for how much work you do and the advocacy you put out, because when you hear on the news a school is doing something like this, you don't have to wonder what school it is, because it's always Winooski. And that's something I think you guys should really be proud of, is that power of advocacy that you guys give, I think is amazing and nothing short of magnificent.
Thank you.
Thank you, Wilma. We will
All right.
Next. Our next guest is Michael Eppolito, our curriculum director on learning.
Thank you.
Am I presenting? Am I going to project anything, or do they have a presentation?
Are we able to? They have the document, but
If they have the document, that's fine. I can just tell them where it's at.
she's going to try.
I don't think we got that.
Yeah, the screen, yeah.
Yep. Oh, there we are.
There we go.
Good to go?
Yeah.
All right. First, welcome to Winooski. It's nice to have you here. I hope you got a chance to see a lot of the school. My name is Michael Eppolito. I'm the Director of Curriculum and Learning here at Winooski. This is my 5th year. Prior to that, I worked in the southern part of the state for just over 20 years. I am going to just talk a little bit about our math and literacy work here. I'm not really sure what the work of the state board is. I don't know if this is interesting to you or not, but it is certainly major work that we're doing here. When I got here 5 years ago, we were identified, the high school was identified as a school needing improvement, and they were being dinged for their graduation rate. And I wanted to look at graduation as starting in pre-K and start addressing it there, because it's too much of a burden for a high school to take all that on their own. So we started off very early looking at both what our math and literacy programs were. Winooski was steeped in balanced literacy at the time, which is, for most kids, is not great. For students that are speaking multiple languages, it's really disastrous. And we could see that in our data. Since then, we've gone through a literacy audit, and then we've updated both our math and literacy programs, done a tremendous amount of professional work, and I'm just going to show you a little bit of data about that. This is not a data presentation, but I just want to show you the way that we're thinking about what's going on with our students, identify a little bit of the work that still needs to be done, and some of the ways that we've used federal dollars over the last several years to ensure that we keep doing good work here. Sorry, my phone is going crazy because we're testing right now, and so lots of stuff going on. Okay, so the next slide, I just want to talk a little bit about our how we're starting to look at data now. So we, 3 years ago, we're now in our third year of implementing both a new math and new literacy programs. These programs run actually in one form or another, K through 10. 11th and 12th grade, we start to switch a little bit, although some of those things continue into the later grades as well. But our primary focus has been ensuring that our students get the best start they can get. And so this is some of our foundational literacy data. One of the things we're looking a lot at here at Winooski is it's not just enough to show one number around how many students are proficient. So we do a lot of disaggregation. I particularly am interested in our language groups and making sure that we are getting equitable outcomes from all of our language groups. And so this is just one way of disaggregating it, looking at language. We do look at free and reduced lunch, we look at IEPs, but for me, this is something that is unique to Winooski, and it's something we need to pay particular attention to because our communities demand that we do right by their kids. So this is longitudinal data. We can see this is all one class as they've moved from kindergarten through third grade. And we can see the total amount of students proficient moving from 22% up to 54%, which is telling us that our programs are having an impact. We still have a lot of work to do, obviously. But we can also see when I first got here, it was very few of our language communities were reaching proficiency in reading. Very few students were. And what's really good for us to see here is we're seeing real growth for students that are not just monolingual English speakers. So that for us is really important. Our third grade data, even at the middle of the year, is almost what it was at the end of the year and when they were in second grade. So we're seeing real growth there, and it's important for us to continue to think about what things that we need to improve upon to make sure that no child comes out of third grade not prepared to read higher level texts. So you can go on to the next slide. This is another way that we look at data. So here at Winooski, we like to focus not just on achievement, but on growth, because we just think that growth matters a lot. And just being able to talk about how students are making progress over time and not getting into a deficit mindset about who's not achieving at the highest level. And so this is just one way of us looking at data. These are quadrant charts we use. This comes out of a program called Star Reading, and we really are looking at. This is our middle and high school. So these are representative. So the reading data is from our reading classes in middle school. We can see that what's really important to us is like all three of our classes, our sixth grade, our seventh grade, and eighth grade, are making either typical or high growth compared to their peers nationally. And most of them, these are median scores, so it's not the entire class, obviously, but the median score for the classes are all, at least in 7th and 8th grade, are above what we consider a minimum expectation for reading. Our 6th grade is one of a class that we're really working hard on, and they've made tremendous growth this year. And on the left side, you can see math. Again, we have some high school data here. And again, all of our classes are making either what's expected for growth or higher than expected growth. We don't have anyone falling behind there. And so it just shows the strength of our programs. A lot of the intervention, a lot of the professional development we've done, the programs we brought in are starting to have a real impact for our kids. And the next slide is just looking at what that looks like in elementary school. You can see our reading data. Again, many of our classrooms are either higher than national norms or right around national norms in terms of growth. And almost all of the median score is above what we expect for minimum achievement. So again, this is looking at data our 3rd year in, and we're seeing that what we're doing is starting to make a real difference. In math, is a little bit more, you can see there's a lot more clustering of performance sort of at that level of both typical growth and just right around meeting our expectations. Our expectations are they sit in the 40th percentile nationally, 40th percentile or higher. And so for me in particular, I pay a lot of attention to this. How are we achieving, and are we continuing to see growth over time? So it allows us to have a much more complex narrative for our teachers, because sometimes it can feel really bad if all your students are not achieving. But when we look at growth, almost all of our students are making growth, which is great. And then the final slide is really just about being identified as a school needing improvement is never fun. However, we got a lot of money, and we were really strategic in the way that we used that money, and we continue to be really strategic in the way that we use that money. We know there are a couple of things that really make a difference. Do students feel safe here? Do they feel welcomed? Do they have people that they can depend on within the school? Can they read? And do they have the numeracy skills that they need in order to do whatever they want once they leave high school? And so keeping those 3 things in mind, I'm just focusing on math and literacy. We have a fair amount of SEL work as well that we do. But just in literacy, one of the first things we did when I got in here, and we took money from the school improvement grant, and we said, even though this is for high school, we think we need to do a literacy audit starting in the earliest grades, because we believe that our graduation issue is tied to how well we're teaching kids at the youngest grades. Once we went through that audit, we used local funds, we used ESSER funds, we used SIG funds to purchase high quality instructional materials of both math and reading. The programs we're using, expeditionary learning, illustrative math in the younger grades, both very well designed, very culturally responsive, and very engaging. We've invested a lot in coaching, both from outside organizations like All Learners Network and I'm blanking on them right now. Better Lessons. And then we've invested a lot in creating leadership teams where teachers are really looking at data, looking at our programs and making decisions about where to go next. And then we also have invested heavily in our interventionists and our coaches internally. We've developed a strong assessment system using money from SIG, using money from ESSER, that we've completely revamped our assessment system and are now using high quality assessments that are giving us actionable data. And the final piece, the piece I want to call out because I think it's the most intriguing work that we've done, the investment we've made, is around this program called Readable English. It's a brand new cutting edge program. We're testing it out here at Winooski. I don't think there's anybody else on the East Coast that's using it, but it's really about teaching. It's about reducing the cognitive load. A lot of our struggling readers, a lot of readers that English is not come easily to. It's a program that sort of gets around that heavy memory load of trying to learn all the rules of English, and it really just allows them access to the English language. It's a fascinating program. I'd love to talk more about it at some point to you all, or to anyone in the state, really. So, I think that is it. Do you have any questions?
So I'm wondering where you learned about the Readable English program, because you said that no one else on the East Coast is using it. So where did you guys learn about that?
Natalie Wexler. I don't know if anyone knows who Natalie Wexler is. She's a big Knowledge Matters person. She's a writer. She's an education writer. She's a journalist. And she has a blog, and just buried in her blog somewhere is this note about Readable English. And I followed the link and was intrigued by it. Luckily, at the time, they were a small enough company. We got to meet with the CEO. We got to meet with the developer of the program, and we were intrigued. So we brought it in. We're having an outside person study the results so that we're making an informed decision about whether this really lives up to its hype. And so far it is. We have one student who has made 2 years of growth in about 8 weeks. It's mind-boggling.
I'm wondering how transient or how volatile your demographics are. Coming from a rural part of the state, that's one of the things we struggle with data sets like this, is are we looking at the same kids year over year? I wonder if you have the same experience.
I imagine our principals could probably speak more directly to the amount of transients. We keep longitudinal data on all of our kids. So some kids do come in and out, but we do have a group of kids that we can see year after year. So I think there's a high rate of transients here. I can't speak authoritatively on that, but we do have a lot of kids, a lot of students that start at kindergarten and spend their entire careers here.
One last question for Michael. If there is none, we're going to have our next guest, and that would be our multilingual liaisons.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. So, but to sure. Mary, you want to join them? If it's okay with you, up to you, really.
Thank you, Suzanne.
Good afternoon, everyone. We want to summarize our role in 7 main points as a multilingual liaison working with Winooski School District. The Winooski School District's multilingual liaison perform various tasks to bridge communication and cultural gaps between schools, students, and the family from diverse linguistic and cultural background. Our responsibility typically include, as I said, I will summarize it in 7 points. Starting by the first point, pre-registration and registration process in our school website, which is called Power School. The second point, facilitating communication. We translate and interpret in target languages for parents, students, and the school staff. We also assist in organizing meetings, events, and communication such as report cards and notices. Supporting academic success. Supporting academic success, there you will see it as a second point. We assist the students with English language acquisition by scaffolding in class instruction, which often involves tutoring or one-on-one assistance. We also advocate for students who can feel uncomfortable enough to express themselves talking to their teachers, school staff, or administrators about their needs. We don't forget about all the applications we can do. We usually, most of the time, we do for our students. Cultural brokering. We help multilingual multilingual families understand the U.S. education system, including policies, graduation requirements, and extracurricular opportunities. As we educate our school staff about the cultural background of our multilingual families, we also provide education to our multilingual family about the U.S. cultures. The next point is building relationships. We establish trust with families through home visits, attending community events, and providing resources for basic needs such as health, housing, utilities, food, clothing, etc. The next point is encouraging parental involvement. We organize workshops and training sessions to empower parents to engage with their child's education and navigate the school systems, eventually becoming independent and feeling more comfortable approaching school staff about their children's needs. And the last point, providing resources. We connect the families with external services such as government and non-profit organizations to meet the needs of our refugee and immigrant families. We help our multilingual families with their basic needs, contribute to our students' readiness to learn and succeed. Many of those needs often go beyond the school environment. We serve as critical links between Winooski School District and the multilingual communities, ensuring equitable access to education while fostering mutual understanding and collaboration. Thank you. If there is anything else, we are many of us here as multilingual liaison, and our director is there. Any questions? Yeah.
How many of you are there total for the Winooski School District?
8.
8?
8 in-house and 3 external providers.
And do you go into family homes? Is that part of your?
Yeah, sometimes when we have like kind of applications or they need some support for many, as we said, we support them in many areas of their lives. Yeah.
Some of the teachers and programs is recommended to visit the family. It's like preschool and kindergarten. The teachers have to do visiting to the family. So that is kind of built in the system. So we do these visits too.
I'm fascinated by this role. Your job is fascinating to me. And I have so many questions, but maybe just basically, hours seems like it could fill every waking hour, including vacation time, I would imagine, things like that. Also, the interplay between your work and the work of, and I don't know if there is such a thing here, but a school social worker, a school psychologist, or those other kind of support networks that often schools have. How are you integrated into that whole system? And I'm really interested in just the size of your job. It seems huge.
Do you guys want to answer or I can answer?
We have our own caseload. Say for Buddhist Nepali students, we are like there are around like 110 students. So we have 2 liaisons for those, and we basically we coordinate each other and work accordingly. I know there are times we need to figure out where to go. Sometimes it happens one person coordinating in both the places it happens. There are some emergencies sometimes during the health office. So we also give some priority to some places your parents need us here, so we go there. Our students need us here, so we just prioritize the thing and then we go and work over there. In some of the cases, I know we also sometimes go to the classroom and help the students. So in that case, if we are in need in some other place, we ask the teacher, okay, we are called in this place, there is some emergencies, we go there. And then we also give priority to our parents because parents need us because they don't speak English. So anyone with a language problem, we give more priority to our job.
I would like to add something more to what was my colleague saying about the hours and the time that we spend here or in school. Even when we are at home, we have calling, texting, all time, early morning, late night. We have sometimes emergencies we need to be in, going to the hospital with the family, going to the court with the family, answering the police questions from any family or any students. This is all under our job. The problem is we're here, we're doing the hours, we're doing the business, and we're really putting it from our heart. Nothing stops us, even if it's no hours for you. The district, there are some issues about containing our hour within 7 to 3, and that's it. We all know this is not the case. We all know. The problem is the culture here, they don't understand what is mean, my job has no end to it. I cannot say, oh, I'm done with my job, I'm going home, there's nothing to do. This is the culture, the community or the system. I would say the system of USA doesn't understand that for us. We have no limit to our hours. I'm here last night until 9 p.m. just to finish registration for the students. If I don't finish it, the student's gonna being home extra time. So I really don't feel okay. I don't know, the system doesn't understand that, but I'm, as a person, I don't feel okay. Students not in the school because of me. So I'm I'm gonna finish 3 of them tonight. I'm gonna do it tonight. I don't know how I can limit my job in 7 hours or 8 hours. That's what I'm struggling. I cannot limit my job with that. Even if they don't pay me, I will do it. And I do want to do it because the benefit is for all community, not just for me.
And our parents, they don't think we work only 8 hours. So that's true also. Sometimes they work, our parents work at 7 and they come home at 5. So if they have anything, any doubt or anything to ask about school, they call us at 6 p.m. And no doubt we take their calls. Otherwise, we don't build good relationship with them. So we take their calls, we talk to them. So our work is not only, as Ms. Abir said, from 7 to 3, our work is beyond that.
When I first hired here, they asked me why your husband fitted, you think you're fitting for this position. I said, I do feel like I can make the schools and the family and the community close. I'm feeling I'm like a bridge between 2 sides, and then I can do job for helping both sides. That's my first thinking about it. Right now, after 10 years, 11 years here, I switch my thinking. We're not the bridge. We're basically the roundabout in the middle, and you have million bridge around you need to connect. A bridge work, I never seen a bridge work more than 2 directions. But right here, I'm thinking about, we're a roundabout, we're not a bridge.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jim. We're going to take one last question, if there is any. If not, I'm going to say thank you so very much for your presentation, and then we can move on to our next.
I was just wondering if we could get their names and like, yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
I'm TP Nirola, Bhutanese Nepali liaison. I speak 5 languages, but I'm using only 3 languages here, like English, Hindi, and Nepali. There are no other people speaking Dzongkha and Bengali. So yeah.
My name is Baudouin, multilingual liaison for Swahili, French, and Lingala. I'm here, I speak more languages too, but the language that we are using here, I'm using just the 3 languages.
My name is Abir Al-Zubaydi. I'm Arabic homeschool liaison.
My name is Daniel Mugwez. I'm also multilingual liaison for Swahili, French, and Kinyarwanda.
Mary?
My name is Mary Mitchell, and while I'm not a liaison, I am the assistant to both Mohammed for the ML department and Michael Abolito for the curriculum department.
And our Somali liaisons are, one of them is in-house today, busy in the school, and the other one is homesick. We have a Portuguese external provider, Karen, and Burmese as well. And
yes, Ms. Lan for Vietnamese.
Vietnamese, Ms. Lan?
yes, we have also a Vietnamese on-call interpreter who used to work in the building, retired, comes in the building as a substitute, and still that the on-call for when we need her to communicate with our Vietnamese families.
And the Spanish too.
Our Spanish was just right here, and he stepped out for a little bit. He, unfortunately, is one of those who are facing deportation, unfortunately. Under TPS, temporary status protection. But we have others in-house that still speak the language, Spanish, and there's a plan in case he ends up being, not deported, he plans to leave before the deadline. There's a plan to have someone else take it over already. Yeah. So I am very grateful for this team, and certainly our school is as well, team members.
Thank you all.
Thank you. It was nice meeting you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have someone else coming? Mohammed? Do we have someone else coming, or is that?
That was our last one.
Okay.
Yeah.
And let me just pause. Are we good with the sound? We're good with sound. Thank you all. Yeah, Mohammed, thank you so much for organizing that. Okay, so that brings us to an update on the Commission on the Future of Public Education in Vermont. So just briefly, the commission only met once on April 7th since our last State Board of Ed meeting. I think the March meeting minutes were also included, but those, I provided the update at our March 19th meeting, so I wasn't planning to go through that again. But at our we had a regular meeting, and then we also had our public input session in the evening. So at the regular meeting, we voted to make Nicole Mace, who's here with us today, the commission's vice chair, and she's now working with the commission's chair, Megan Roy, to help with agenda planning, and also I believe you'll be leading maybe our next meeting because Megan won't be able to be with us. So voted in Nicole. We also had a legislative update from the legislator, well, I think it was just Peter Conlon who was with us that day. And even there, I can give you Peter's update, but as we all know, it has changed since then, so I'll kind of run through both. So the House Education Committee has approved the governance and policy part of the Education Transformation Bill. Peter Conlon's House Education Committee refocused the role of the commission to look at governance. So this is just, the way this works is this bill has started in the House, and so I can reflect what the House Education Committee has done, and now we have reached crossover, so the House bill has now gone to the Senate Education Committee, and I'm sure it will be, continued to be worked on from there. So the House Education proposal also seeks to add 5 non-voting members to the commission to look at school district boundary setting and to present up to 3 options to the General Assembly. And they've also proposed a timeline that I believe is longer by a couple of years than what the governor's education proposal had suggested. So that part of the bill, talking about governance that came out of House Ed, was then joined with the foundation formula that was worked on by the House Ways and Means Committee, and that passed out of the House on Friday. So the bill, as I said, next goes to the Senate Education Committee. Then from there, it will go to the full Senate for a vote. From there to conference committee, then to the full General Assembly as we get into the summer months, and then ultimately probably to the governor. So the other thing that Representative Conlon mentioned is that the House shares goals with the Senate, which I think is really important to focus on. There's some difference of opinion on the substance and the timeline, but fundamentally, I think there's agreement that the education the education funding formula needs to change, and they seem pretty clear that they're looking at a foundation formula. What that ultimately ends up being is something that they'll discuss over the next few months. So the next thing that we did during the regular meeting was we approved an updated work plan through June, and we've reverted back to committee structures that will meet during our regular monthly meetings. So we've kind of divided into groups that meet in different locations during our monthly meetings. I was assigned to the governance subcommittee, so the charge of that is to use the framework that was provided to us to analyze key considerations for redistricting to between 5 and 20 districts. Considerations will address the Commission's 3 guiding principles of equity, quality, and sustainability. We were given the task, although I'm just speculating, this might change. We were given the task to analyze the House Ed plan. There was a proposal that came out of, it was Senator Bongartz, who's the chair of the Senate Education Committee. He's sort of put together a proposal, and then of course there's the governor's proposal. So there's 3 different models that are going around. We were tasked with looking at each of them. I wonder if that charge might change given where, the direction that things seem to be moving, but that's just me thinking out loud. So when I met with this governance committee, and I'm on that committee with Peter Conlon, the House Ed chair, Mike Leichleiter, who it represents, he's a superintendent, and John Castle, who is on the commission on behalf of rural schools in Vermont. So the 4 of us are on that committee. We had some conversation about, what is the policy and what is it trying to achieve. We had some discussion, and we all agreed that the policy that we're trying to accomplish would be to bend the cost curve by winnowing down the number of supervisory unions and supervisory districts, and to build up scale to increase opportunities for students. We identified underrepresented and underserved populations that might be impacted by the proposed policy as both rural populations and urban populations, and agreed that we want to maintain voice for both of those groups. Obviously, we want to make sure that we really maximize the opportunities that are available. And then we also had some discussion, because this also comes under governance, of the State Board of Education. And it was interesting because I think just in that conversation, some of those committee members weren't really clear on what the State Board of Ed does, which they're not alone in that, I will say. So it was kind of helpful for me to be able to explain the role of the State Board, how we engage in rulemaking. Interestingly, this meeting was a week ago Monday, and I had to keep ducking off the meeting because I was getting emails like once every 5 seconds and phone calls, and it did kind of illustrate the point that the board lacks support. And, I mentioned that when all of those emails are coming, one person is charged with answering them. When there are meetings that need to be had, one person is having those meetings. We don't have support staff that, can take those phone calls, or, we don't have administrative staff to help us respond to those emails. And I think that really did hit home as we were having that conversation. And so what came out of that committee is recognition that the board definitely needs more resources. Again, I will say I think there's agreement in both the House and the Senate that we need more funding and we need more support to allow the board to do what it's meant to do. And the idea that we want both the State Board of Education and the Agency of Education to play to our strengths. So that was just an initial conversation that I'm sure will continue on from there. And then we had the input session. I was online that day, so I was put in a session with a representative from our communication engagement specialists. And so they facilitated the conversation, and there were probably 6 or 8 members of the public who were also put into that room with me, where they talked about, what are important outcomes that you want Vermont's public education system to achieve for students, families, and communities? What barriers can you identify? How could changes in district size or structure affect students, families, and educators in your community? What would need to be true for district consolidation to support more equitable outcomes across Vermont? We talked about funding, we talked about quality, and sort of the final question that was asked is there one thing that the commission should keep in mind as it makes recommendations that will shape the future of education in Vermont? And I will say, sort of overarching, there's a lot of agreement that whatever changes are made need to be student-focused. We want to support communities. We want to increase opportunities for children. I think people are really concerned about the prospect of school closure and what that would mean in terms of commuting or extracurriculars that might be available to their children after school. So lots of concerns about how any changes might affect whoever it was who was, raising the issue. So I'll pause there and just see if anyone has any questions. Okay, and I did not write it down, but if I'm doing the math right, I believe our next meeting will be on April 21st, and we toggle between being in person with a public engagement session in the evening, and then the next meeting is just online. So I believe our next meeting will be April 21st from 9 to 11 online. All right. Any questions, let me know. Okay, so this takes us to our break, but we are fully ahead of schedule. So let me just pause. Do board members feel like they need a break? Should we keep going?
Well, are you going to hear the next group of people here? Is there somebody else coming?
Maybe we could deal with agenda item K.
Yeah, I'm wondering.
Interstate children.
No, because she's going to be here as well.
Okay.
Lisa.
Oh,
yes.
Oh, perfect. Okay, so let's pick up agenda item K. This is the Military Interstate Children's Compact Commission. Let me just get my notes here. What I did with them. Bear with me one moment, please. I've got my cheat sheet. Okay, so we've got, one of the State Board of Education's responsibilities is to name a commissioner to the Military Interstate Children's Compact Commission. This is something that comes before the board with some regularity. And I received an email last week saying that our prior commissioner was no longer able to serve in that position. And so I just want to acknowledge Jill Briggs-Campbell for doing some pretty quick work and bringing a recommendation before the board. The agency's recommendation is to have the board appoint Lisa Helm who is with us today. Thank you very much for coming. And I'll give Lisa a couple of minutes just to talk to the board about her background. But let me just say that I believe you work with the agency, but you come from a military background, and she volunteered to serve in the role and seems very well qualified. So with that, Lisa, I will turn it over to you. Thank you. Welcome.
Well, thank you. I was really excited when I was asked about this because I am a Air Force brat, so to speak, and grew up in the military. My father was career military, served in the Vietnam War with distinction, and as a child, we would move every 2 years. I have vivid memories. Some of those moves were on to government bases, of which our schooling then was in a government school, of which you're probably a little aware of that infrastructure that exists. But others, as a child, I was coming into the local school. Depending on where we were at. And those were some of the toughest moves. Because when you are in a military family and you move frequently, what you find is that you grow up around children like yourself who are used to moving. You carry, even if you're from very diverse backgrounds, you carry a perspective of adaptability, acceptance of people from many and all walks of life. You live a short time in a place, you learn to make friends quickly, you learn to be flexible. So moving into some of the communities that were not on a public school, government school, culturally and climate-wise, there was a big difference. Because you were moving into a community where all the students already knew each other, you were definitely new. They would have nuances everywhere from moving into a community in Arkansas up to a community in Kansas. Those were the two that stand out, where they have certain ways of doing things, and that was always a harder hurdle to cross. And so as I looked at this particular assignment, I felt like recalling that experience as a student in public schools, and then as an adult. My husband served in the Air Force for 4 years, and I'm very proud to say my son is an active member of the Vermont National Guard on full-time service. 2 grandkids, so they're at Flynn Elementary School in Burlington. And so I am abreast of some of the work going on here in Vermont, and to think that I could be in a situation to help families and their students give guidance, support, when we have families moving in or perhaps negotiating a school system they're unfamiliar with, that would be very rewarding to me. And so I appreciate the nomination. And I have already gone to the website for the compact and looked through all the resources. I was also fortunate at the last Guard deployment. I did work for the state and was able to contribute to the Yellow Ribbon events, of which at that point I was doing adult education work in the finance area, and was able to do workshops helping these families prepare for the year-long absence of what in most instances was the main person doing the main earning. And again, that was really gratifying to act as that trusted bridge, and I really see that this position is that sort of thing as well. We have a very small military community here in Vermont. Those that are in it are very dedicated, and I view the state board in supporting this effort is providing a really important link to help make sure our families are connecting the best that we can. So again, thank you for considering me, and I'm really excited about being able to do this.
Thank you. Before we entertain a motion, does anyone have any questions for Lisa?
I'd love to make a motion, though.
Well, I will entertain a motion that the State Board of Education appoint Lisa Helm, Student Pathways Assistant Division Director, as the Commissioner for the Military Interstate Children's Compact Commission. Lisa's military family background and prior experience collaborating with the Vermont Army National Guard to bring cybersecurity training to our school districts will be beneficial to this role.
That's exactly what I would move.
Took the words right out of your mouth.
I will second that.
Any further discussion?
Just gratitude. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And you bring an important perspective on this, having walked in. And thank you to your son for his service.
Thank you, whole family.
We'll make this official. All those in favor, please raise your hand and signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, please raise your hand and signify by saying nay. Any abstentions? The motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thanks for coming in the snow.
Okay, Zoe, if you're ready, why don't we move to your memo? And I just, again, want to set the table a little bit about this conversation. Zoe did put a memo in our, for inclusion in the agenda packet with regard to the New England School for Girls. As the board is aware, we serve a number of different capacities, and one of those capacities is handling revocations, suspensions of approval. And there is a process that starts with a complaint being made. There's a lot of work that happens before anything, and I'm not naming any school, but before any issue would ever come before the board. A complaint would be made, there would be an investigation that would be done, a report would be generated, a school would be given opportunity for feedback on the report. There may be the Council of Independent Schools. If they would also have an opportunity to have feedback on the report, that would then go back to the secretary. And at that point, if the secretary recommends to the board revocation or suspension of a school's approval, the board would engage in what's called a quasi-judicial capacity to have a hearing. There would be an opportunity for the school to be heard, and the board would render a decision at that point. So I can tell you right now, there has been no recommendation from the secretary to the State Board of Ed. So I think if we're having a conversation, I just want to be really clear that we remain in our neutral power. We serve, the funny thing about administrative agencies, and I think a lot of what the board sees is the legislative, the rulemaking part of things. But this implicates more the judicial part of things, where it's important for the board to stay neutral and to not have an opinion on things that are not before us, and we certainly don't have information that would allow us to make a decision. So with that, Zoe, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. So we did submit a memo, and the intention of that was to respond to inquiries from made to the board around this particular school. Our emphasis here is on explaining the process, to your point. So it was not intended to be a fuller discussion with the board today, but I did, upon request of the vice chair and adding this to the agenda item, I did ask our legal counsel, Emily Simmons, and also our director of education quality, Lori Dolezal, to be on the call to answer any specific questions that the vice chair may have regarding the process.
Sure. I just thought it was important that you sent a very detailed memo yesterday, and so I just wanted to make sure that we had a chance if anybody had questions about that, in addition to me. I think one of the questions that I had is, I think what I read in this memo is we have a role that the agency plays, and we have a role that DCF is playing, right, around personnel. And that's a complicated role to navigate. I know this is a school that we've had issues with at least 3 times, and sort of that murkiness between the roles of the agency and the department have been part of that in the past. So I'm curious, we have a situation where we have a school that has a residential component and an educational component. And that educational component cannot operate independent of the residential component, right? It's a residential school. So when I read your memo, and I'm trying to understand the staffing and the roles between the department and the agency, if in fact the residential component, right, is intrinsic to the educational component, why is it that we, as the agency and the state board, why is it that we're deferring to the Department of Children and Families to make decisions about staffing and things along those lines? Because, right, this school can't operate without the residential component. I mean, that's part of the educational program. It's no different than a boarding school. So can you help me understand that a little better?
I think your question is related to what are the roles and responsibilities when there's shared oversight between the Agency of Education and the Department of Children and Families. I think this is a bigger question.
If you're speaking generally.
Yeah, so this is a bigger question just around that process. I think it does warrant, if the board would like to entertain that, a presentation around what that involves and clarity around those roles and responsibilities. Our team is on now to address those kind of in the short order. But I think this is part of a fuller conversation. We will be providing testimony also to, I think, a couple of different committees just in providing an overview around the process for renewal and approval and investigations and clarifying roles and responsibilities. So that detailed information can also be made available to the board so that there's clarity of understanding.
Yeah, I think that's a really important conversation for us all to have. I mean, this is the third time we've had a problem with this school. These are some of our most vulnerable children in the state, right? And they've been failed multiple times by the process, and we have a school that's failing them again here. And so I think it's really important that we understand sort of how do we strengthen our process to protect children so these kinds of things do not continue to happen.
And I would just caution you, because
I understand that.
The investigation is not complete.
I'm talking about prior events, right, where we do have data on this, 2018, 2023. So we have a third instance before us, but I think the question that the memo raised for me is, this memo is all about DCF reviews staffing, right, and whether or not we have appropriate staff there. And it seems to suggest that that is their jurisdiction, but at the same time, this is a residential educational program, right? How do we separate the responsibility of making sure that we have appropriate staff at a school? Because children don't differentiate between when the school day stops and starts. They're there the whole time, right? And they're there because it's an educational program. And so I'm just highlighting, it's just struck me as I read this memo that this is a really important thing for us to drill down on in terms of process. Because we keep having situations where we've got one agency here reviewing this, another agency reviewing here, but the reality is from the child's perspective, they're at that school, it's an educational program, and because it's an educational program, both the agency and the state board have a responsibility here, right, with making sure that we have appropriate staff there, regardless of what the Department of Children and Families says or does.
I think the agency is very clear on its responsibilities and takes it very seriously. And so I want to make sure that that's very clearly communicated on the record. What we're highlighting are the different roles and responsibilities and the shared oversight, along with a process improvement as well as we move forward. As you know, I cannot comment on prior cases before my tenure. And so we are very much taking this process and our responsibility seriously and following, the requirements.
There's no implication that you aren't. All I'm doing is when I read this memo, it struck me that if we're thinking about this as a whole child, right? We're thinking about this from the perspective of the child, that this bifurcation of responsibility between the department and the agency is potentially problematic. And I'm calling on not just the agency, I'm just saying more generally, what struck me from this memo is that this is a part in the process that we all need to think through more. I am not to be clear, I'm not faulting the agency. I'm reflecting on the fact that I think the memo is very thoughtful, and I think you are committed to this, but what I'm reading in here is that this just feels like a systemic challenge. And when we start to talk about opportunities for improving the system, I think this is one of the places we have to do that. Because a child is there by virtue of the fact that they're receiving an educational program. And we can't separate the day program from the evening program. And we can't have two different bodies making decisions about the staff that are there in a way that are not coordinated. And in the end of the day, I think it's the agency and the state board's responsibility, since this is an educational program, to make sure that these kids are safe first and that they're receiving a quality education.
Yes, so it was not on the agenda today, but I do think it's really important for us to be able to come back and share the type of coordination that is in place. So shared responsibility does not mean that we're not coordinating, right? And in fact, that is a requirement that we're continuing to stay aligned with our partner agencies in this case, and we have other partner agencies and other areas of our responsibility that we're being really intentional about clarifying those roles, responsibilities, and accountability, because it is really important. There's actually strength in the partnership, right? But there's needs to be great intentionality around how that shared oversight is implemented, and I think the board would benefit from an understanding of the way in which the agency and DCF as a partner in this process are coordinated and what that looks like. I think that could be very beneficial. I could ask, Lori, if there's anything you want to expand on, just kind of at a high level of touching on some of the ways in which we're doing that and in areas we're improving, that could be helpful.
But I want to be clear, there's a difference between shared oversight and responsibility, right? And when we, as a state board, and the agency is part of that process, right, approve independent schools, such as this one, we have a responsibility to those children, right? And what I'm saying is that if these are programs, even though they have a residential component, and the staff for that residential component it needs to be considered as part of our approval process, because that is an educational program. I am uncomfortable with completely deferring that to another agency. Right? We need to, what I'm suggesting is that in our conversations about process, we need to be thinking about that going forward. Because this is happening more than once. In this particular instance of a school, it's happening in other schools. And it's something we really have got to get our arms around.
So to clarify, are you indicating that you want to revisit the rules governing this?
Maybe we do.
Can I ask a clarifying question on that? So I think where you're going is like, what if the Department of Ed says you have to have 3 people there for all night long or whatever, because it's a residential thing, and then DCF says you only need like 1 person there, which rule do they follow? Is that where you're going?
Well, I think that's part of it, but I do think that when we, as the agency and the state board who share responsibility in this process, approve an independent school as a school, it's an educational school, we have to take into account if it's a 24/7 school, we need to take into account the 24/7 capacity of that school to serve children, not just the teaching and learning that goes on during the day, right? We can't separate that for a child, right? That child goes to that place for education, but they're also there in residence. And so when we consider whether or not we approve these schools, we also need to consider whether or not that school, not an institution, that school has the appropriate qualified staff, the appropriate models for supervising those staff in hours when children are not in classrooms. Just like we think about making sure that we have appropriate staff and staffing models and educational curriculum during the school day. Because those two things from a child's perspective are all part of where they exist. We can't pull those apart. And the thing that struck me in this memo is that we have a bifurcated system between DCF and AOE, and then we've got the state board in here, right? And we've got to be clear, yes, there's coordination going on here, but in the end, we are responsible for approving these schools, for whether or not a child goes there. And what I'm saying is we cannot separate we can't separate the educational component from the fact that that child is there overnight, and whether or not that child, when they're there overnight, is safe. It's the same thing.
So I see that Tom, sorry, Tom.
Sorry, I was just going to ask, I agree with that. What currently does that look like in the approval process? I mean, for any boarding school or a 24/7 school, how is that taken into account in our approval process?
No, it is. It is.
So it varies. In a boarding school, a typical non-therapeutic boarding school, the the accreditation process looks at the boarding component, so that visiting team, ASNE, NEASC, will look at that component. So that, in those schools, it is the recommendation that will come from the agency will include that information from the accrediting agency, and that will be part of their recommendation to our committee. In a therapeutic school, the agency will have received information from DCF about this part of the school, doesn't do its own investigation or observation of certain things. And then that comes before my committee as part of the packet of information that we get when we decide whether or not we're going to approve a school.
And there are very clear standards in our rules for what we require in terms of, background checks, criminal record checks. Our rules are very clear, but, much like any other rule that might exist, the board sets out the rules. I think we assume good intentions. I think most organizations try to comply with the rules as they've been set out. But it is foreseeable that an organization isn't always going to get that right. And so there are several layers of, is this a simple issue that can be corrected with technical assistance from the agency? Is it a more serious issue? But to your question, there are, really clear requirements in our rules.
Okay.
Did you have a question, Tom?
No, I just wanted to clarify that it's not that we don't, that there's no attention to that issue.
No, we're just taking information from DCF.
Right.
Right, which is going to the agency, which is coming to us.
Right. And that's my understanding of the way the process has worked.
And what I'm saying is that I think we all owe it to the kids to take a second look at that process because it's not working very well for the benefit of kids. And that's all. That was what struck me about the memo.
I think also that the team can make a distinction, and I'll let Lori weigh into this, on the actual approval process, and then when there are criminal investigations, right, that could occur, right, for an approved school, right? Those are separate that I think need to be.
And I'm being careful not to talk about criminal investigations. I'm talking about the approval process because we're not talking about that because of our quasi-judicial role.
But I think that this conversation needs to be informed by an understanding and a review of the existing rules and the existing process by which the agency and the DCF operate. I'm not sure that any further conversation on this is productive today.
Yeah, I think all I'm doing is raising the same issue you are, which is this seems to be something we need to have more discussion about and more in-depth discussion about. And it may be something that we need to take another look at in terms of the rules. It just struck me as a part of that memo that this seems like something that warrants more discussion.
Sounds like a whole item agenda to be discussed. And
Yeah.
it sounds also like there's an
I agree.
agreement that
I agree.
there is a need of clarifying roles and responsibilities and the coordination of those
That's right.
entities taking this work on.
But I don't want to leave here assuming that a request for clarification indicates that there's a problem, right? I think that's
Well, I think
important.
there's a problem because we have kids who are being subjected to abuse. And so I want to make sure that we've thought
But
about
again,
it clearly.
we don't know that. We don't know that.
In the past, we know that there have been instances in the past, and I'm not naming a particular school. And I think it is important that when we are talking about the lives of young people, that we take another look at the process to make sure we have done everything we can to have a process that works.
So, and I think it's important to recognize too that we do have a process, and I mean, like, we have schools, independent schools, public schools, where there have been issues with, racism or bullying or harassment. So we have a process that's in place, and I'm not convinced that it means that the system isn't working because there might be schools that come before the board because they've not complied with the rules. I would argue that we have rules our rules are in place, and we have a system that allows that behavior to be caught, corrected, addressed, rectified.
I would argue that we owe it to our children to always be in a moment of continuous improvement with respect to our processes and our rules, and that there is enough evidence floating around in the past, even in the present, to suggest that a closer look at that process to make sure that we are doing everything possible to protect our children is an important thing that we do. We may decide that we're doing everything we can. That's fine too, right? But I think we owe it to our children to take the moment to take another look and make sure that we are doing everything we can and that that process is working the way it should. And I don't think that's an unreasonable thing for us to do as a board, because that's part of our responsibilities. It may be that we find everything's just fine. We may not, but I think we owe it to the process to make sure that we are running a process and having a continuous improvement mindset.
Tammy, if I may say, I support your suggestion, and I think you are trying to keep us being proactive, based on experience and what happened, and avoid anything major happening. Who knows, maybe tomorrow or so. So being proactive and be supportive.
Again, no one's pointing, I'm not pointing fingers at anyone. I think there's just been enough conversation, and this memo stirred in my head the fact that we need to make sure that we are constantly reviewing our processes to make sure that we are doing the very best job we can. That's all.
The agency is absolutely committed to process improvement, and there's also, as we go through this and review, it's important to understand the roles and responsibilities of the agency as well. And so what you're describing is a role of the state board to contemplate potentially changing rules, which may even result in a recommendation to the General Assembly to change statute, right? I mean, I think it is really clear as we're engaging in this conversation when we're talking about process improvement to understand roles and responsibilities, because we all share a commitment to protecting our most vulnerable students.
I'm going to end it there. So it's 2:30. I think what I'd like to do is just take a quick break, and then we've got Katie Ballard coming in at 2:45. So with that, we can take a pause. We're back. All right, so thank you, everyone. Next up on our agenda, we have Katie Ballard joining us. I believe she's online. So just for new members, just to provide a little bit of background, and it's also in the agenda packet, the Individual with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA, requires that each state establish and maintain an advisory panel for the purpose of advising the state special education staff regarding the education of eligible children aged 3 through 21 with disabilities. Panel members include teachers, representatives from state agencies and independent schools, among others, and the majority of members are either individuals with disabilities or parents of children with disabilities. So Katie Ballard is the chair of SEAP, and she provides updates to the board every few months on the council's work. So this is our quarterly update, and Katie, welcome.
Thank you. So this update will be a little bit more informal. One of the things we've really been working on, sorry for the echo. One of the things we've really been working on is updating our unmet needs document. So that's going through all of the priorities and all of the conversations that we've been having at the panel, and starting to really kind of tease out what are clients' concerns, what are questions that we have for the AOE, and what are areas of unmet need for students and families with disabilities across our state. Our next meeting in May is actually our full day in-person meeting, where we do a lot of our conversation around the unmet needs, and we'll hopefully be able to finalize. I did send Maureen a copy of our current working document for any state board members that want to look at it, but that is not the final draft. Just to give you an update in our conversation, since we last updated you, we've been working through our conversation on transition. So really trying to get a sense of what is happening for students with disabilities as it relates to transition plans, transition assessments, and what information do students and families have readily available to them. As part of our earlier in the year discussion, one of the priority and focuses that we had for the bulk of the beginning of the year was doing a lot of conversation and exploring around independent schools, around the process for students who are publicly funded, so they're paid for by their home district, but they're placed in a special ed school, understanding who has responsibility as LEA and who has kind of ownership for the fate of those students. We've also provided feedback to the AOE on several new indicators and target scores, as well as feedback on parent involvement surveys and education. Most recently, we've started talking about the barriers to professional development, specifically in the field of special education, where we talked about funding, training to travel, the geography of our state that makes it a little bit hard. Some schools only have 1 or 2 people available to be in these specialist training, a lack of substitute teachers and staffing. And then there was some feedback looking at potentially that some districts don't always meet the needs of special educators, and general educators are not offered a lot of learning on their role in providing services or accommodations to students that are in general education settings with disabilities. And one thing that we heard very clearly from the professionals on our panel is people are really burned out on virtual learning options. So really trying to think through how can we bring some professional development specific to special educators and to folks in that field, navigating some of these specific issues that have started to come up. What we're looking towards in the next couple of months is a robust conversation about artificial intelligence in special education. So some of that is conversation around students' access to artificial intelligence. Some of it is conversation around starting to get information that there are districts who are using artificial intelligence to help write parts of IEPs and programs. So wanting to get an understanding of, one, the confidentiality piece, making sure that student information isn't being placed in open source avenues, but also wanting to kind of work with the AOE and get an understanding of where their guidance might be in the future in this field. The last 2 conversations that we're really trying to be more proactive in is funding conversations, both locally and nationally are obviously starting to get more involved as we look at special education funding across Vermont. And as a panel, wanting to be more proactive in conversations as it relates to serving students with disabilities and their families as it's across the state team. So we would just put out to the state board and to the Agency of Education if there are conversations or reports about special education coming out. Our panel would love to be able to provide feedback or comments those reports as part of the process. I'm going to take a pause and see if there are any questions, just because that was a lot of information all at once.
Thank you, Katie. I'm curious, I mean, there's an awful lot that's happening on the education front, both national and state. Are you hearing of changes on the national front that would affect special education?
I think one of the biggest things that we are curious about is obviously the Office of Civil Rights, especially the one in Boston being closed. is pretty concerning for families across our area that either have active office civil rights complaints or we're in the process of considering filing. One of the conversations that we've talked about as a panel is getting an understanding from the Human Rights Commission as well as some of the other judicial bodies in our state and of what options families would have without the Office of Civil Rights, understanding that the first thing we always kind of look to is the state process. And so one of the questions that we have asked the AOE, and I imagine we'll be getting the answer to at our next meeting, is has there been an increase in complaints being filed? Has there been any conversation or discussion about how we're going to support families with those civil rights violations in navigating a complaint process that no longer exists?
Thank you. Board members, questions or comments?
Okay, this is Mohammed, in case you can't see me. Thank you for your presentation. There is one element I didn't quite catch, unless I missed it from what you just said. I have been running into situations working in the schools here in Vermont where most multilingual learner families are not well versed around special education. And to be more specific, whenever the word disability comes up, most, if not all of these families, they would think a psychologist from a school or a special educator from a school or a teacher referring their child for an evaluation is labeling their child as crazy, literally. I've been working with a team of multilingual liaisons here, just with my own experience and terms around special education and trying to help them be explicit in a way to push away that stigma that we are seeing. But I was wondering whether whomever the AOE is working with to translate the documents given to families around special education. I even wonder, I'm not gonna question the accuracy of the translation. That's not my point, but I wanted to bring to our attention that most of our population do not read or write in the languages these documents are translated in. I feel like we are wasting money translating documents that are not being read by somebody. Yes, we may think of, oh, this is their civil right. Oh, legally we have to give you this document. It's your parental rights. If I don't understand my parental rights on a paper, I think we are missing the most important purpose. I just wanted to point that out, and I'm happy to extend the conversation with anyone within your team to support this work, because as you remember, around 3 months or 4 ago, some schools were labeled as disproportionate about having equitable choices who is special ed or who should not be a special ed learner. So I'm happy to extend this conversation with anyone, and or maybe if you have any information to provide us. I'm even looking into, on top of my own training to my multilingual team of liaisons, I'm looking onto institutions maybe that are specialized more than I am to train multilingual liaisons, for example, into communicating these terms with people from different languages.
So I will just say that is one thing that we as a panel have we have started to explore, but I think one of the things that we have heard very clearly is access to interpretation and translation is not always possible, especially in rural schools. One of the things that we've talked about at the state level and that we're seeing kind of in some local communities is schools that have the local level special education parent advisory council have been able to host more of those training opportunities, some of which are geared towards people who speak different languages. I will say I do know this is separate from my panel work, but I know that the Council of Parent Advocates and Attorneys, one of the things that they're working on nationally is coming up with training programs specifically in alternative languages. So right now they have one that they're filing that is primarily spoken in Spanish, and really trying to move away from just translating and interpreting documents and expecting people to understand them, and moving towards more hands-on learning. But that is definitely a conversation that I think the panel would love to see continue more in this state across the board.
Yeah. I think some of what I'm hearing in your description is not just about direct translation, but making sure there's cultural relevance and being able to clearly communicate what is written in that document. So I do think it would be helpful to just have a follow-up with our State Director of Special Education so that we can further that dialogue.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Kathy.
Are there comments or questions for Katie? All right, and Katie, you said your next meeting is in May, is that right?
Yeah, so we have a full day in-person meeting May 6th, and then we'll have one final meeting in June. Okay. But after that, we would be able to share our unmet needs document and our annual report.
Okay, so maybe we'll hear back from you again maybe in July.
That would be a good timeline, yes.
Great, all right, thank you so much.
Of course, thank you all for your time.
All right. Have a good afternoon. All right, so next I'm going to turn this over to Zoe for the Secretary's report.
Great. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Chair Samuelson asked me to provide an update on the Title VI certification request from US Ed to states. So I'll provide that update and open it up for questions. So we received a request from the Office of Civil Rights on April 30th to requesting certification with Title VI. This is the Civil Rights Act of 1964. We have always been in compliance with that as part of our anti-discrimination efforts as a state, and is part of the assurances in receiving federal dollars. We have responded to that request. The response is two-part. One is to certify that we continue to be in compliance with Title VI. We were also very clear in our communication to US Ed to reject conditions that are not within the law, and specifically calling out the ambiguity around the terminology of illegal DEI as being challenging, and we really expressed also our disappointment with how I think DEI has been kind of weaponized in this conversation. And so what the letter does is it certifies, yes, we're in compliance, but it affirms our commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion in our schools. We also very clearly indicate the ways in which diversity, equity, and inclusion play out in our schools, and recognizing that those practices are really important to developing a welcoming and inclusive environment, and clearly indicated that we would continue to implement diversity, equity, and inclusion practices in our schools, as we always have, with a really strong affirmation that those are allowable within the law and even in many instances necessary in order to uphold the ideals and the intent of really ensuring every student has access to a great educational opportunity, is not exposed to discrimination, and is supported in a whole child environment. So that is the update. We have submitted it as a statewide response. We have heard from the U.S. Department of Education that there won't be any feedback to states until the 24th. So we will wait to see if there's any further questions or actions thereafter. But I think the really important thing to recognize is that the state of Vermont has really clearly demonstrated our values of focusing on diversity, equity, and inclusion. I will say personally, it's one of the reasons that compelled me to come to Vermont, is because Vermont is known for being an inclusive state and one that really values differences of opinion and accepts everyone for who they are. And I think that's really important for us to reinforce and give assurances to our schools and to our educators that really is a Vermont value. We heard today in the presentation from the Winooski leadership and staff that there are really lived experiences of feeling kind of attacked because of this rhetoric and this language, and then very concrete instances of deportation and things that are creating a lot of fear in our communities and our schools. And so I do think it's important for us as a state to continue to stay focused on our values and what matters most to us. And then in our response to US Ed, it was really focusing on ensuring we could protect our values as a state and also protecting federal dollars to which we are entitled to. And there's a significant amount of money that our most vulnerable communities depend upon. The Agency of Education has been working with the Attorney General's office in this particular response and in reviewing other directives that have been coming from the federal government. We recognize that there's a lot of uncertainty. I don't think this is the last time that as a state and as a broader community, we will be navigating these challenging directives and conversations, and just want to make sure that we can all stay focused and on what unites us in supporting our students as we navigate challenging and uncertain times.
Thanks. Take a pause there. Does anyone have questions for Zoe?
I'm curious. I think you're right. This is not the last time we're going to see something like this. We may see something on the 24th in a week or so.
Right.
Thinking through the process of sort of how this all unveiled, right? And I'm thinking about the nearly 700 emails that I received, I think everybody else on the board, right? Like, I don't know that this process worked all that great. And so I'm curious how you reached your initial decision to shift responsibilities to our school districts for certification. And that's a shift from how it currently works, right? The responsibility is with the state. And so by shifting that responsibility, it put our districts in a potentially in a very vulnerable position. And that was the first motion, right? I mean, I know we walked that back, but I'm just curious, like, how did we reach that initial decision to do that? And how are we, what can we learn from that moving forward as we're going to have other directives that we're potentially going to have to respond to? I mean, are we going to continue to sort of have this as the state trying to shift responsibility to the districts? Is that sort of going to be our consistent opening bid on these things? Or how is this going to work?
So I think, as you know, the directive was for districts and the state to certify. So it was not the state of Vermont's shifting of responsibility. It was the directive that was received from the federal government to provide assurances that all districts would sign and the state. In working with the Attorney General's office, they felt that the decision was made to really think about how we could maximize our legal protection, and that was the strategy to do so.
The legal protection for the state or the legal protection for the districts?
For the state and the districts, our responsibility is for all districts.
But my understanding was when I read the materials that you were asking each district to make an individual decision based on their legal counsel, which meant we could have districts complying and districts not complying in the state. And that puts the state at risk as well as the districts at risk.
So we can go back through a chain of events. We received the communication on Thursday. We had a preliminary review in coordination with the Attorney General's office. We provided an update to superintendents to make them aware of the initial review and invited superintendents to office hours the following week. The intention of that was to have an opportunity for districts to consult with their legal counsel and come back to engage with the agency to ensure that there was clarity around the state level strategy. The letter that we submitted was always the intent. That wasn't telegraphed. I think some of this is challenging because you're thinking about telegraphing your legal strategy to the federal government to which you're going to respond. So there was an intent to say this is information, we're providing it to the superintendents. We expect an opportunity to review this and move forward. The risks that you're describing is the reason that in coordination with the Attorney General's office, we did move forward with a statewide response.
So let me just make sure I understand you. So the strategy always was the strategy that you used. You just didn't tell the districts that when you sent them the letter on Friday or in the meeting you had with them. And we caused all this public outrage because we weren't telegraphing a strategy? Because that doesn't seem right either. Because
the Friday communication was providing an overview of the legal analysis and indicating, giving assurances that diversity, equity, and inclusion are lawful. That was the intention of that communication. It was written in very legal terms for the districts to be able to be aware of that and engage with their legal counsel.
But wasn't the request for the districts to consider whether or not they signed the form or not?
The directive from the federal government was for the districts to sign.
No, what was in the Friday letter? I'm confused.
So the Friday letter was to superintendents to share the communication we received from the federal government, our initial legal analysis, an overview of how process by which we would collect certifications and an invitation to participate in office hours.
Right, so you signaled to the districts on Friday that you were intending to collect the certifications from them and that they should seek counsel to figure out whether or not they wanted to do that, right?
I think that is not an...
Because I think that's how districts understood it.
So clearly, this is a very... these are very challenging and unprecedented times to navigate on incredibly sensitive issues that are core to our values in Vermont.
Well, I think we all agree on that.
And I think it's important that we all share those values.
We all, yeah, I agree with you on that too. I'm just confused about telegraphing strategies because what I heard you say is the strategy always was to send the letter, to not have the district certify anything.
No, that's not what I said.
Okay, so can you clarify?
So the communication, we were operating under a very tight timeline, under very high stakes and uncertain times. Felt it was appropriate to inform the districts and to invite additional conversation the following week. Our intention was always to submit the letter that we did certifying and also that districts would certify. The decision not to include the district certification was to ensure that we could protect all districts, knowing that may not all feel comfortable moving forward. But there was always going to be the time and the space for the Agency of Education and the Attorney General's office to share the deeper analysis of our legal review and the contents of the letter that we intended to submit. The state has managed these matters in other agencies, and it has been a common practice to make amendments to this form to make sure that there is clarity around what we are signing on to. What we communicated on Friday was kind of signaling our legal interpretation and saying that yes, we are in compliance, and we believe diversity and equity inclusion is lawful and will continue. That was the intent.
But the intent on Friday was to have the district sign the forms.
That was the recommendation.
Whose recommendation?
The Attorney General's office.
The Attorney General made that recommendation, not the Agency of Education? Who made that recommendation?
So again, the directive from the U.S. Department.
No, I'm trying to understand, like, internally, who made the recommendation?
Dr. Colby, it is important to recognize that the U.S. Department of Education requested districts and state agencies to sign this certification. We are communicating that directive. And there was coordination with the Attorney General's office in doing the legal review and outlining the next steps. I want to also keep in mind that there was a 1 business day turnaround between that initial communication and responding to the confusion and concerns of the community, along with a change in the mechanism by which we would proceed to ensure that we could position the state in a place of maximum protection, and that is protection of our values and protection of public dollars to which we are entitled. And we have been really disciplined since the Trump administration came into leadership, saying that we would review all of the data, we would be timely in sharing information, we would host additional meetings and office hours to support in navigating this work. And that is what we did. This particular response is incredibly consequential. And I think it is an important time for, it's a learning opportunity. As I said, this is not the first that we're going to navigate. And so it is absolutely a learning point, a learning opportunity to ensure that we are all operating from a place of those same values and priorities, and always building in additional opportunities to provide feedback and support. Notably, our letter was ready to send on Friday, and we said, we're going to actually wait till we meet on Monday with all the superintendents so that they can see it before it's submitted, right? And so those are actively lessons learned around how we continue to improve.
Any other board member questions? And is there, I know this was like a big part of your update, do you have other?
There are other, federal updates that I can share. I did provide the board, I think, with an update around the Trump administration's decision to rescind the approval of late liquidation requests that was approved under the Biden administration. So those are part of our COVID dollars. So there was an opportunity, there was discretion under the Biden administration to extend those until December of 2025 for any dollars that were remaining. We very much followed the process both at the state level and district level to pursue those funds and gain approval. And we're operating under the assumption that they would be available until December. We did get notification from the Trump administration that they would rescind that. There is a waiver process for reviewing exceptions, and we are in the process now as a state of submitting waivers, and we've been providing very consistent support since this announcement with our districts to helping give them pointers and support and technical assistance in developing the waivers for their districts. At the state level, it does have a very big impact on our ability to implement our priorities. It is the funding supported our Read Vermont initiative, And so that has been really unfortunate that there's a pause in our ability to provide reading coaches and support in the field at this time. And we are hopeful that we will get a waiver approved. I will share a highlight that we are continuing with our professional learning series. Those are going forward uninterrupted, and we've actually had literacy experts give their time pro bono to be committed to that work so that there is not interruption. So that is a significant impact that we're managing.
What does that mean as a practical matter? Like if Read Vermont is on hiatus for the moment, like what does that mean from a school's perspective?
That means that schools that had coaches, teachers that were paired with coaches in their classroom, they are not in their classroom right now. It is very, very much an on-the-ground impact that is felt by teachers.
Well, and I think I also saw like the summer programs where money had been.
Yep. So districts that had the opportunity to utilize these remaining funds, many of them put them towards summer camp. Some were actually invested in ongoing construction projects that are active. So for those that did gain approval, it does have a significant impact. I think it's about a $16 million impact when we look overall at the state. And so that is it's a real strain on both the state and at the state level and the district level to implement on some key strategic priorities that we're using these funds for.
When do you find out about the waiver? If it's been approved?
It's unclear. Right now, they are reviewing reimbursement requests that occurred prior to March 28th, but weren't submitted at that time, so it's unclear right now. But we're just continuing to keep the field updated on what we learn and really putting forward as detailed and robust of a request as possible. And we feel strongly that these projects are really very much in line with the objectives of the grant funds to support students recovering from the COVID-19 pandemic, and are making sure to support and provide technical assistance for our districts to make those strong connections.
I have a question about that Title VI letter. So all states received the same letter from the Department of Ed, right?
Yes.
And I don't know if this is a question you're able to answer, but how did other states handle this? And in relation to how we handle this, did other states do they have it district by district to comply, or I don't know.
The states are taking different approaches. Some states have taken an approach similar to Vermont, where it's a statewide response. Others are collecting certifications from their districts. And we did hear from the administration that they would not have any action until the 24th, so it is hard for us to ascertain what would be the most advantageous position.
Yeah, a judge in New Hampshire stepped in on this, and I can send you the court case if you want, right, around saying that they wouldn't be penalized for the districts. But until that court case, right, happened, a district signing it was signing a legal document that they normally wouldn't have had to sign, right? Because that assurance right now is in our statewide ESSA plan. So our state right now certifies for the state, and then under our ESSA plan, we monitor that, right? And we have responsibilities for that. When the districts are asked to certify, they are now being asked to sign a legal document that they don't have to sign right now. And so that's the difference. The court stepped in New Hampshire and said, all bets are off on that right now, and I can send you the court case if you're curious.
So we're not the only state that at least suggested the possibility of doing it district by district then for compliance.
Correct.
That was the federal request.
Yes, that was the federal request.
Okay.
But that's a change in policy, right? And that change in policy was really intentional. That change in policy was intentional, right? Because then what they can do is they can go directly to the districts to hold them accountable in a way that that now they have to work through the state.
But all the funds flow through the state anyway, so.
But they can hold a district accountable under Title VI in a different way. It's It's not just about funding.
I mean, I'm glad you pulled the scab off on that, because I gotta tell you, our meeting was that Monday night after that went out. Or when did it go out? It went out on
Friday
night. And, I mean, we had, everybody was up in arms because it was so different and nobody had known. And I really, I wouldn't do your job for $1 zillion. I don't know if that's a real number, because it is so off. I mean, everything is up in the air, but I've never seen anything create such a furor, and then like the superintendents are like, calling the attorneys. I mean, so it cost everybody lots of money, and I understand not showing your cards. I mean, that's part of the whole game, but it was really, it was a tough thing, and I'm really sorry that you all have to go through that. It's like everything else. I feel sorry for the group here that has to go through this, but yeah, it just seems like I don't know, it seems like the communication was a little difficult, and I'm not faulting anybody. It just seemed like it made a lot of people really, really anxious, and it makes everybody understand how everybody feels, because it's not the same as being removed from the country, but it was, how do the superintendents do that, and then what do they do to the boards, and then, where does it all go? So it's really tough, and I really feel bad for all of you. It's not going to be an easy couple years.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, and I think I certainly feel the weight of responsibility. I mean, what we do is very consequential in responding to the federal government, and I would love to protect our districts and our principals and our students and our teachers from really, I think, what's very damaging rhetoric kind of coming out of the federal government, and these confusing directives, right? And so that is certainly something I take seriously. I think, as I said, this is a learning opportunity for all of us to make sure that we continue to stay coordinated. I do want to note there was a very short turnaround time, right? So from Friday to Monday, I think we had addressed many of the questions and was actively engaged over the weekend in helping to clarify. I think where there was a really big misinterpretation or concern, I think the concern was that the agency was saying you're not allowed to do DEI practices. And that's not at all what we were saying. We were saying we feel we comply, and we're calling out this part in the letter that affirms our right to implementing diversity, equity, and inclusion in our schools. That's the intent. And it's very challenging. This is a legal document, right, between the state and the federal government. And there's also kind of broader concerns that we need to address in our state to make sure that we're giving reassurances of the culture that we want to have here, right? And we need to do both of those things at the same time, and that's challenging.
And I just want everybody to understand, I'm not trying to compare it to, somebody's getting ripped away, but it's just, it's just one more layer of what everybody's going through. So,
Lots of anxiety.
Jennifer, can I interrupt? This is Lyle.
Yeah, Lyle and then Mohammed. Yes.
I'm sorry. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. I've been listening in for a while here. I think I'd like to put this conversation in perspective. This is definitely a challenging time. And you can still hear me okay?
Yes. Can you hear us, Lyle? Because we can hear you fine. Oh, we've been muted.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay.
You can hear me?
Yeah.
You can still hear me?
Yep, fire away.
Yeah. Oh, all right. So I just want to put this. We've never, ever gone through something like this in our history before. And I would like to applaud the AOE for responding both reasonably and both to reasonable and confusing requests. I think there's been a strategy by the federal staffers that they're providing very short timelines for responses, and it's intended to create confusion and impose power and control over is reviewed. We need to be careful, I think, to take care of Vermonters, and I believe the governor and the secretary are doing just that. We need to maintain a patient, composed response, and we need to support the governor and the AOE. And I think we need to ask them, how can we help them? Thank you.
Thanks, Lyle.
Thank you, Lyle. That lands on my brain again. What I wanted to add is that with this current situation, I'm asking myself a question and invite you to maybe ask the same question. When we are asked not to operate under DAI or use DAI practices in our districts, I think there is a need to ask the question, what's your definition of DEI? And what is our definition of DEI? When I think of DEI, especially the diversity work in education, goes beyond the colors of the skin of these people we serve in our districts. I do not limit DEI work to that. I invite us to think of our students with disabilities. That's a whole culture. An educator would need to know how to collaborate, work with a student with disabilities. A teacher who does not have some professional development working with, let's say, a student who is deaf or blind. That's what I think of when I hear DEI in education. So I just want to make sure to support this work, to support the AOE, the secretary. I invite us all to ask this question to the feds. What do they mean by DEI? What about, and I want to remind us, some disabilities are hidden.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that, and also we've had conversations with our superintendents over the last couple of weeks. This is an opportunity for us to be really clear on how we're defining diversity, equity, and inclusion in our schools. I think that's going to be really important for us to point to in the coming weeks, months, and years, so that we're very clear this is what it means in Vermont. We've set up within our response the legal position that kind of backs our approach, and have identified, just highlighted a couple key things, right? And the reason we highlighted some specific examples, like having a DEI coordinator and other examples we included, was because those were specific questions we were receiving from the field, right? And I will say it's really heartbreaking to hear the types of questions that are coming from educators. Right, and it is really indicative of kind of the fact that many of our educators, not all, are feeling they're operating in a sense of fear and uncertainty. We know that's happening at the federal level. At the state of Vermont, we need to protect our educators and make sure that they are supported. I think we've said this on the record many times. I mean, this strategy from the Trump administration is intended to create chaos. It is intended to incite fear. It is intended to create uncertainty, right, on what we're allowed to teach, what we're not allowed to teach, what programs are allowed to implement, what programs are not allowed to implement. And I've had experience navigating through this in other contexts and have seen what happens in terms of self-censorship. And we do not want that to happen in Vermont. So I think the statement that I provided on Monday, I think the letters, the communications, I've really tried to reinforce, that we are very supportive of these practices. And to your point, we need to further articulate what that means and how they're really embedded in creating positive, welcoming learning environments. So it's an opportunity for us, right? And I think we should take pride that this is a core value of our state.
The religions around us. You have the Jewish, you have the Christians, you have the Muslims, We got to learn how to live together and cope together, to function together, to be a community.
Yeah. And it's a question too, having like, how do we have public discourse around these really, really challenging topics? These are difficult conversations to have one-on-one. They're really difficult conversations to have with 600,000 people across the state that are having really different experiences and reactions to any communication. And I can certainly commit that in my role, I really take this seriously, and I want to make sure that we're clear in our communication and that we're following up. And if something's confusing, we need to know, right? Or if something's creating alarm, we need to know, right? And I think giving each other grace in this time is important as well. This is really unprecedented, what we're navigating. And I just can't say this enough, like, our responses are incredibly consequential. And they're consequential to funding for our most vulnerable students. And when we talk about protection, we're talking about two things: protecting our values and protecting federal funding, right? And there's maybe different pathways to get there, and those are conversations we're going to have and continue to have, and point to what we mean. When we say it in Vermont, what does that mean? Just an opportunity for us to get more precise and clear about what makes us special. And I will say, for someone who's been in Vermont for a year, it's a really special place, and that's what we're trying to protect, right? So.
Thank you.
I think we can leave it there. We have a special education AOE update, but we're a little ahead of schedule. I don't know, is it Meg who is joining us?
Cassie Santo is our State Director of Special Education.
Okay.
Cassie, are you with us? I see.
I am. Hi, guys.
Hi. Let's get out of the way.
Sorry. I'll admit that I'm the person who muted your room earlier because the echo, and it's happening for me right now, it's happening. So distracting. So I'm telling you guys that because I'm going to do my best talking over my echo in the background.
Can we just mute this room whenever there's a person speaking? Because I think that's the problem.
It does resolve if you mute the room.
Okay.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Cassie Santo. I am the State Director of Special Education, and I am in month 6 in this role. Thank you for muting the room. I'm going to be able to do this so much better now. Hi. I'm in month 6 in this position. I am learning, and I'm super eager to be here with you all and to have the opportunity to work collaboratively in our state to improve outcomes for all students. Since taking this position, our team's primary focus has really been on improving our integrated monitoring process, and that's a puzzle piece of our greater general supervision system. I only anticipated to have 10 minutes here, so just naming that for you all, that I don't have an in-depth presentation, but I'm happy to come back and talk more about any of these topics in the future. So we've been really working on improving our integrated monitoring processes, and we've been receiving a lot of support from the National Center for Systemic Improvement, or NCSI. They are an OSEP-funded technical assistance center, and they've been working really closely with us to redevelop how we monitor special education and how we can be more effective, to help us develop a greater understanding of the state's needs, and help us to enhance our technical assistance and professional development offerings, really agency-wide, to better support the field. There are a few key changes that we have made. There are several processes that are still in development. And then we have many professional development opportunities from divisions throughout the agency that our team has initiated in an effort to build a collective understanding of how the entire system can really be leveraged to support all students who struggle. So I'm going to start with a summary of some of the changes that we have been making to our integrated monitoring process. Like I said, I'd be happy to come back and dive deeper into any of these components in the future. So there are 3 types of monitoring that might occur within our special education monitoring system.
We have universal monitoring, and those are going to be your annual collections and analyses that happen every year. And there are a whole plethora of those across the agency that occur. And we are making one change within that world, and that is to our local special education determinations. And again, I can go through what that means in more depth at another time, but we have changed that universal monitoring tool to hopefully give us better information about how we universally support our districts. Then we have cyclic monitoring, and that is that each year a different cohort of LEAs undergoes cyclic monitoring, and we do a more comprehensive review into several special education indicator data points. LEAs are monitored in cyclic, like I said, every 5 years, and this is another area where we are making some greater changes. We are building a differentiated cyclic monitoring process, and we are embedding the use of a risk assessment to help us to determine if LEAs might be in need of a standard cyclic monitoring approach or a more intensive approach. Standard would be a routine collection of specific data points, and intensive would be standard plus a little more. And that little more is really going to vary depending on what we learn when we are completing our risk assessment and analyzing an LEA's data. Lastly, and still within the monitoring system, we have due diligence reviews. These are off-cycle targeted monitoring occurrences, and so if a concern is reported to us and that concern is considered to be what OSEP calls a credible allegation that might warrant further investigation, we might enter into what we are calling a due diligence review. This is a newly developed process within our system. It's in response to guidance from OSEP from July 2023, and it's a process development that we've really needed for a long time. So again, not going to have time to go into a lot of detail of what a due diligence review will look like, but happy to come back and share what our team has been working on in that regard. Within the changes to monitoring, we are also actively making efforts to visit schools, and that has meant refining and improving our site visit and desk audit processes and making sure everything is up to date since some of the rule changes took place in 2023. We are a team of 10 and a half folks, and there is a lot of work to be done, and what I just shared, it really only scratches the surface of the work that our team does to not only maintain federal requirements, but to work with our state to improve outcomes for students. It has been a heavy lift, and that really covers the changes that we have made, and the process is still in development. And the last item I wanted to share with you all is related to professional development opportunities from divisions throughout the agency, and the efforts that our team is making to de-silo special education at the state level, and again, to further build a collective understanding of how the entire system can really be leveraged to support all students who struggle. So to that end, we are hosting what has been coined as a Knowledge Week in August, where we have every division from across the agency represented. We will be offering a virtual collective professional development opportunity, and the trainings and discussions that we have put together are based on the needs that we have observed by being more engaged with the field. We are also hosting a conference in October that's going to be for directors of special education and other school leadership to come together to analyze their local data. We are focusing on data literacy and continuous improvement at this event. Our data division will be there to support each LEA in reviewing their local level information, and we will have every division represented to continue to build upon this foundation. That special education is not separate, it's not a parallel system. Students with disabilities are first and foremost members of our school communities, and meaningful and lasting improvements in special education, they have to be an agency-wide effort, a community-wide effort, really a Vermont-wide effort. And as our team of 10 and a half makes changes to how we monitor and how we provide technical assistance, it's also necessary for that work to not just be the work of our team, but that we have a shared responsibility to break down the silos, create a sense of belonging, and ultimately to ensure equity and access. I wanted to note that we did capture Mohammed's concerns and the need for culturally relevant information for multilingual families. I have some resources that I'll share with you all as a follow-up, and our team, myself and other members of the team would be eager to come back and talk more about support for multilingual learners and special education topics in general. So thank you for having me here today. Like I said, I was anticipating having to go on at 4, and I have to leave at 4:15 to get my daughter, so I wrote sort of a quicker bit there, but now we'll have some time for questions, so thank you. Thanks for having me here today.
Thank you, Cassie. Thank you to the chair and vice chair for including this on the agenda. We thought it would be helpful when you get a panel presentation to also get an update from our special education team as we work really closely with the panel. And want to just emphasize, we are looking at this as an agency-wide effort. Really commend and appreciate Cassie's effort in doing that training and also making some significant improvements to our overall monitoring approach. And that is a big priority and focus for us at the agency. So wanted to make sure that you had a sense of that and would be happy to come back and provide more detail as well.
So can you describe, like, on a day-to-day basis, like, what's the connection between the Special Education Advisory Panel and the work of the agency?
So the advisory panel, I'll let Cassie talk about that on a regular cadence. And then Cassie, if you can also just speak to kind of the coordination across the agency in terms of creating a broader focus and support for our learners.
Yeah, and I might not describe all the Special Education Advisory Panel meetings totally correct here on the fly, but we meet bi-weekly. We have executive meetings, and then we have full panel meetings that are happening monthly. And during that time, we really get to engage with members of the panel about the unmet needs across our state. They offer us advisement, and we get to just really have very robust conversations about what is going on, what to anticipate, changes that parents and community members would want to see. And I honestly learned a lot from those conversations. We all just met last night, and we take their unmet needs to help guide us with what TA and PD we need to provide and what other greater issues are going on in the system. And then in terms of really engaging the entire agency, our team has been out in schools a lot this past year, and I worked in schools in Vermont for several years. And so one thing that we know, and that I know anecdotally, and that I think our team knows from going into schools, is that there are big systems issues going on that sometimes pop up in special education, but are indicative of a greater need throughout the system. And so we're really working with Zoe to engage all the divisions in the reality that students who struggle are everybody's students, and we have to build up our systems and train all of our educators to be prepared to work with students who have disabilities. And so that's really where bringing in the greater agency comes in, not only to build up baseline information about how we train teachers and how teachers work with students with disabilities, but also baseline information about special education processes in general. I think there's often a mentality of being a little scared of that world if you don't know the legislation, but because it's not a separate system, it's not a parallel system, not understanding how that system is within the whole limits us from really being able to address the issues. So I hope I answered your question there, but that's sort of our aim of trying to make sure that this is an agency-wide approach.
Thank you.
Hi, Cassie. This is Tammy Colby. Thanks for the great presentation. I'm super happy to hear you're working with NCSI. They're terrific, and I think you're working with Kat, and she's great too. This monitoring, the tiered monitoring approach, I know has been really successful in other states, and it's great to hear that we're implementing it here. Who is included in that monitoring? I think I'm unclear. Is that publics, independents, and therapeutic schools? Are they all included in that tiered monitoring approach?
So they would be monitored through their LEA. And this is new learning for me too, Tammy, and we've connected with NCSI on this topic. So
it's a tricky
we're going into 5-year cohorts. Right now we have the 52 districts that would be split up across those 5 years. When we then go in to do cyclic monitoring with those districts, we are specifically requesting documents that would be for students going to those independent schools, and that is our avenue for reviewing those documents and that service delivery within that independent school.
How about
it has to come through the sending school, through the LEA.
Yeah, so let me see if I'm making sense of what you're saying. So we are reviewing, our therapeutic schools are part of this monitoring effort to the extent that we identify a child who's attending, who's the responsibility of an LEA, right? So we see a child.
Tammy, sorry to interrupt. Could you start over because you were muted the first?
Oh, sorry. Good, because I'm not sure I asked that question right. Got it right the first time. It's complicated, right? So let me just make sure I'm understanding this. So LEAs have responsibility for their children. Some of those children end up being placed out of district in a therapeutic school. Our monitoring of therapeutic therapeutic schools comes into play when we identify a child who within an LEA, right? So we see a child who goes to therapeutic school X, but there's no explicit monitoring for therapeutic schools in and of themselves because we're based on LEA cohorts. You're on mute, sorry, Cassie.
Not within just this purview of our special education monitoring. I know there are separate independent school monitoring rules and processes, but in terms of our responsibilities with monitoring through OSEP,
right.
We are supposed to be getting those documents from the LEA and making sure that we're getting those independent schools and reviewing them. So that's just another step that we have to take when we're going into our different cohorts to make sure that we're capturing that data. And Tammy, I am new to this role, so I can't speak to the history of how this has been done. Meg might be able to speak to that a little bit more, but
I actually don't. Yeah, it's just an interesting question. It's one of those places where IDA bumps up against our system, right? Because the child is the responsibility of the LEA, right? And the IDA funds, right? Our requirements under IDA flow to the LEA, but we have therapeutic schools operating out here who take tuition dollars, right, from LEAs, but they are not under the same umbrella of monitoring as our LEAs by virtue of the way the IDA funds flow. Right? That's how I'm understanding. Okay. It's just, that's an interesting challenge for us, I think.
I would agree. I think it's a very complex challenge, and having listened to a lot of you guys' meetings over the past several years, I know that this is an area that we maybe have to do some more development and have more conversation in, Tammy, but per IDEA, that would be how you're monitoring IEPs through those independent schools.
Yeah, it's tricky because, for a child to be sent out of district, right, that's usually a child who has extraordinary needs, right, that the district cannot meet. And so in many cases, these are some of these are children who are more vulnerable in other kinds of ways, right? And so, yeah, that is a real tricky situation, and that it's interesting to know. Okay, thank you for clarifying.
Absolutely.
Other board member questions? All right. Well, Cassie, thank you so much for being with us here today. It does sound like there would be some interest in having you come back at a future meeting just to kind of untangle this a little bit more with you. But this was a really good introduction. Thank you.
Yeah, I would love to come back and I can prepare more of a presentation where we can really dive into some of the work that we've been doing. And yeah, thank you for having me.
Have a good afternoon. Chair all right, well, this takes us to future meeting planning. I know that in May, we're going to be at Virgin's to honor Gray, so. Better not be snow.
I just don't want to get locked out of the building, like Gray explained to us, right? Like they locked the building meeting out. Remember you explained? Like,
you can get out, you just can't get back in.
Right? It's the one thing I remember about Virgin's. Don't be careful not to get locked out of the building.
Yeah, for that meeting, so will you reach out to Jens, or what should I do to inform?
So, have you, Maureen and Suzanne, have you already reached out?
We haven't reached out yet, but it's, yeah.
Okay. So yeah, they usually do all of the coordination, which is terrific. What I would say is you kind of get a sense of what we do when we're in person. Love to have a tour of the school, and I also realize like the in-person meeting days are longer. I do think it's important for board members to be able to see as much of, or attend as much of the day as they can, just because I think it's good to be there, see the school, see what your day looks like. Lunch, and then if there is someone from Virgin's, could be a student group, could be the administration, teachers, whatever. If there's something that someone would like to bring before the board and just let us know, those tend to be kind of idiosyncratic to the school. So, yeah. I mean, that doesn't necessarily implicate you.
The school about that. opportunity.
I mean, we'll reach out to them, but I guess what I'm saying to you is like, if you know if there's a student group that would want to present before the board, like that would be something that you could help facilitate. Yeah.
Make sure it's not snowing.
And that we have keys to the building.
My studded tires will be off by then.
I got a lot of stuff to do first.
So, we'll have sort of our usual setup with the agenda, commission update, secretary report. We may have independent schools that might come before the board. We'll see if they're ready. We will certainly entertain them, although I think they'll go first to the 2200 approvals committee, so we'll figure out the timing on that. And if anything else comes up, there are a couple of things, emails that there are issues out there, but whether they're ready for me or not, we'll see.
I have a question about the summer.
Yes.
Sometimes we don't meet every month during the summer.
You sound like you have a...
No, I was thinking maybe someday I might have a summer, but I just know people are planning vacations. And are we thinking we're going to have meetings, or do we want to take a month off in the summer? What are people's thoughts on that?
I think it really makes a difference what's going on for Zoe and her group.
Last summer, you guys took July off, right?
Yeah, we did.
My first meeting was August.
Yeah.
I mean, part of the thinking that is if people are going to be gone and we can't get a quorum too, right? So coming at it from both directions.
And also what the legislature does, because, they'll all be, they all try to get home for haying season. And
Got to get first cut.
Going to come out of that.
Yeah.
I mean, I think if we can afford to not have a meeting, then we don't have to have a meeting. But if we have to have a meeting, it's got to at least try to have it happen. So we could just, I don't know what's coming up. It seems like it's a very busy time. So we could hope that we don't have a meeting in July, and then if it turns out we need to, I'm sure it would be an online meeting, and just hope we could
get a quorum.
People together.
Yeah.
I mean, you actually only need 5 people, which is not that much.
Yeah.
Well, it depends what legislature does.
Yeah, I agree. So, maybe.
Yeah, no, while we were meeting planning, I'd just put that out there.
Yeah.
I have this is a technical thing, not a content thing, but it seems like we had a problem with the microphones today, and thank you for muting and unmuting us endlessly through that one conversation. I don't know if there's anything we can do about that. We should at least make sure we have a plan for future in-person meetings to be ready to keep ourselves muted whenever the people are talking, and vice versa, to make sure that everyone can be heard. Okay.
Anything else? All right. This brings us to our second public to be heard. If there's anyone who wishes to address the board, welcome. You can come sit. And then if you can just start by introducing yourself and where you're from.
Certainly. My name is Carol Winfield. I'm from Westford, part of the Essex-Westford Supervisory District. And I'm here today to ask the Agency of Education and the State Board of Education to intervene on the consolidation of the Westford Elementary School middle school students to Essex. The Essex-Westford School District failed to follow many of their own policies on a number of points, including they did not allow sufficient time for public input and discussion. They did not conduct an impact study of the affected communities. They did not develop a multi-year plan. The projected savings of an insignificant 0.1% of the nearly $100 million budget to close our school is only a one-year plan. This plan would create substantial inequities. In transportation, they freely admit the current busing situation in Essex does not work. They have no strategy to fix it, but they want to add our children from 10 miles away into the mix. This would create bus rides of 2 hours or more, projecting late arrivals at school and late arrivals home, limiting access to extracurricular activities and family participation. placing undue and inequitable hardship on the children and their families. This plan also puts our school at significant risk of closure in the near future as it increases our cost per pupil with a half-empty school. There is no evidence of cost savings from any consolidations, but ample studies with evidence of the negative impact on children taken out of their community schools, both emotionally and academically, and this is a great inequity. The negative impact on families and on the communities with plummeting property values and lack of growth in a small town with no school. Although this plan evidently was not well planned, the school board has adamantly stated they will not reconsider. We are asking for your intervention. Please contact us for more details to correct this inequity. Thank you.
Thank you. And may I ask that you share that to be included with the minutes?
Send that to me? I certainly will. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. Do we have anyone online?
You might want to mention it one more time.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, I see Katie. Katie Bell.
Katie, do you have your hand raised? Yes, you do.
I do. I just want to make a quick public comment. Katie Ballard. I live in Essex Junction. I'm the parent of a student at Westford, and I just wanted to echo what's already been said with just the disappointment in the process that the school board took when it came to consolidating and moving the students from the Westford Middle School. One board meeting, they voted to pause the Westford Middle School move, and then the next school board meeting, there were parents upset from the Summit school closure conversation, and so the school board immediately reversed their decision on the Westford vote. And so it was just, I am very often at many tables and in conversations with policies and hard decisions that have to be made. I absolutely understand and respect that. In this case, I do not think due diligence and, adequate public information was happening throughout the process. And I would encourage any sort of intervention or support for a more thorough plan to happen from either the AOE or the state board. Thank you.
Thank you. And let me just say, I don't know if there's a role for the state board to play here. Certainly public comment is an opportunity for anyone to address the board. I'm not sure that there is a legal role for the board to play. If there is, we will look into it and get back to you. Anyone else? Online, *5 if you're on the phone, or hand icon.
Yeah, this is Lyle. Can you hear me again?
We can hear you, Lyle. How are the iBots doing?
Yeah, there has been an echo, and I know you would be deeply disappointed if you didn't hear me talk about the Rutland Area Robotics Program.
There we go.
So we are, in fact, in Houston at the World Championships, where the iBots will be teaming up against teams from all over the world. There are 60 countries here, more than 600 teams, and they will spend the next 4 days showing off their robotic prowess, and I'm sure that they will make Vermont proud. So they are the single Vermont team that is here in the robotics, the older team category, and so we hope to bring home some good news at the end of this time. And thank you for allowing me to talk about Rutland Area Robotics one more time.
When do they start competing, Lyle?
Yeah, say that again.
Lyle, when do they start competing?
I did hear him say 4 days, so maybe
Yeah, I didn't know.
tomorrow, Friday.
I'm sorry, the robotic thing on my phone was telling me I'm no longer muted. Was there a question?
Yeah, I wondered when they started competing. I know you said 4 days. I didn't know if you were coming to us live from the floor. There were robots running around, already competing, or are they getting ready? Where are you in the process?
Well, we flew in last night, and they're now on the practice field today, and the challenge matches will begin tomorrow, and they'll spend 2 days getting ready for hopefully being eligible for the championship on Saturday. So more to come after
online? Is there a leaderboard or a scoreboard or anything?
Oh, there is a way to do that, and what I will do, you can watch the matches actually on what is called, one moment please.
Robot.net.
I will send the link to Jennifer, and Jennifer can send it around to everyone else. So you can actually watch live as things are happening here. And there will be, during the championships, there'll be about 55,000 people at the George E. Brown Convention Center.
Well, wish the team our best of luck. Well, I guess they don't need luck because they're terrific already, but we wish them the best.
Yeah, keep us posted, please.
We'll send along information.
Thank you, Lyle. All right.
I think we should thank our two new board members again. They both brought us in under time.
That's right. Thank you. Thank you, Cynthia, for being remote, and Lyle. All right, if there's nothing further, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. All right, second?
I'll second.
All right.
Mohammed, I was giving you the chance this time.
All those in favor, please raise your hand and signify by saying aye.
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 Bye.
Just get up.
I think we're unanimous. Thank you all.
Vote with your feet.
Oh, no, I can't.